Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the Industrialized Construction Opportunities and Barriers Conference. We have a lot of professionals, scholars, and students that are joining us today from around the world. So good morning, good night, and good afternoon to all of you. We have a very dense 4 hours ahead of us, so I will do it short. My name is Shirley Kujawski-Kenneth. I'm an independent architect and a senior adjunct lecturer here in the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning at the Technion. I am very excited to greet you all at the opening of this event. Before starting, I want to thank the Faculty of Architecture and its administration staff for the collaboration, to Professor Daphna Fischer-Gewirtzman for the academic support, and finally to the Azrieli Fund that made this event possible. Before starting, since we are on Zoom and we don't have the small talks and schmoozing built in yet in the platform, we are absolutely encourage you to use the chat option to introduce yourself and to meet and interact with others. The program will be on the chat shortly for people who missed it. Now, please let me introduce you for opening remarks, Professor Daphna Fischer-Gewirtzman and Professor Yasha Grobman. Professor Daphna Fischer-Gewirtzman is the chair of the architecture program at the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning at the Technion. She serves as the academic director of the Visualization Laboratory at the Faculty of Architecture. Professor Yasha Grobman is the dean of the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning at the Technion. He has 20 years of activity related to architectural technology, especially in innovative computer-aided architectural design, evaluation, and fabrication. The stage is yours.
Just unmuting myself. Thank you, Shirley. I'm very happy and honored to open this conference. And this is a wonderful opportunity to enhance the awareness of the industrialized construction field in practice and in connection to academia, in research and also in teaching. Industrialization has become more relevant than ever to the profession, and we realize how important it is to our faculty at the Technion, both in its curriculum and in other ways, such as an international conference, to expose our students and faculty to the discourse of leading people in the field. Construction industrialization in various capacities taking place in Israel for many years already, but since technology is progressing, it is important to update and learn through looking at international advancements. I have to tell you, I asked Shirley to take the challenge of developing a course in industrial construction that would give our students tools and an understanding of the meaning of industrialization in construction already while developing their architectural design concepts. Architect Shirley Kujawski-Kenneth, our graduate with honors that returned after quite a few years of practice abroad, not only teaches a fantastic high-level course, but also initiated this conference in no time. So thank you again, Shirley. And of course, I thank all the distinguished speakers who came to the first conference of its kind in recent years. Ms. Amy Marks, the head of Industrialized Construction Strategy at the Autodesk, Professor Ryan Smith from the Washington University, Mr. Alain Waha from Cogital, architect Dan Zohar from Zohar Architects in Norway, engineer Tali Hirsch-Sherman from the Ministry of Construction and Housing, of course in Israel, architect Erez Ben Eliezer from the Planning Administration, and Dr. Vitali Priven from the Tidhar Construction Company. So I wish all of us a stimulating conference and hope that in the future, we'll be able to hold a follow-up conference, actually meeting physically and not in Zoom. And now I'd like to invite Professor Yasha Grobman, our dean, to say a few words. And I'm happy to share with you that he agreed to teach an advanced design student next year, focusing on exactly these issues. So thank you also, Yasha.
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you, Shirley. I'm super excited to be here today to see so many people from around the world and Israel. I want to say, to start by saying that it's not regular that an adjunct professor in the faculty is organizing an international conference. And for this, I think we really need to thank Shirley and somehow to try to tell everybody, please do so. We will help you. We will do whatever we can to facilitate this type of events. So, as you know, Israel is facing tremendous challenges in many fronts. The previous month has unfortunately emphasized some of them. One of the main challenges, one that has the power to magnify other challenges, is the increase in population. By 2050, about 30 years from now, our population is expected to double. This has a potential to double all our challenges. That's scary. In terms of the building industry, this population growth means that everything in Israel that has been built in the 74 years of the Israeli state existence has to be doubled. And that's hyper scary. Megidovich, the city engineer of Tel Aviv, had a similar challenge in the beginning of the 20th century when Tel Aviv was started, although a little smaller in magnitude. His solution is reflected in a slogan he invented. And he said, let's first build and then measure design. Fortunately, this is no longer an option. The building industry in the 21st century is too regulated and organized to allow construction without designers. However, every young architect student in Israel knows that there is a discrepancy between Israeli as one of the world leaders in many high-tech industry and the way Israeli, or the majority of Israeli buildings are built, which relates more to the 20th century, if not the 19th century technology. So how do we cope with the need to mass construction in the near future due to population growth and maybe some unfortunate destruction? One of the leading answers could be industrialization of the building construction and a massive shift towards 2D and 3D modular building. Countries with similar conditions, such as Singapore, has already embraced this solution and now shifting into 50% of the construction based on 3D modular construction in the near future. The Israeli building authorities has long identified this challenge. A group of researchers in the Israeli National Research Institute, and I see Professor Zaks, the head of the institute here in the crowd, conducted a comprehensive research that defined the challenges and gaps for the Israeli building industry. I'm sure we will hear more in the final panel of this conference. The enormous challenges I mentioned are the reason that the Technion and the faculty are hosting this conference. We believe that it will open a way for a much larger and greater scope activities that will combine the building industry and the Israeli Ministry of Housing and Construction and all of you researchers and students at Technion. So I want to welcome all of you for joining us. I think it's a very important conference. I think it will lead the way to a series of conferences and maybe a shift in the Israeli thinking about industrialization. And I want to finish by saying again, thank you, Shirley Kowalski-Kenneth, for your initiative and for arranging all this conference. So thank you all and good luck.
Thank you, Yasha, and thank you, Daphna. Okay, so our first keynote speaker will be Amy Marks. Miss Amy Marks is a pioneer in the construction industry. She is known as the world's preeminent prefabrication consultant and often referred to as the Queen of Prefab. Ms. Marks serves on the leadership team at Autodesk as the head of industrialized construction strategy and evangelism. In this role, she leverages her passion and years of consulting experience to enable and empower the global AECM industry to implement and adopt processes for industrialized construction, including prefabrication and modular. After the presentation, you will have time for questions. So, Amy, the stage is yours.
Thank you. I love being introduced by such established, amazing women and another esteemed colleague, a male colleague, but it's great to see such really established women leading the conference. And really, Shirley, we owe you a lot in pulling all this together. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think you're going to hear some things today that I've actually never said out in public before. So I wanted to do some really new things and talk about some new things. I have really strong feelings about the country that most of you come from. And I think it would actually be really beneficial if we talked in terms, as the last speaker just talked about, of what we can do as Israel, to make sure that we stay ahead on technology and what could possibly be there for you as an innovation cluster. And I think that's really important. So I'm going to do a little bit of level setting on language so that we all know we're speaking from the same page. And I always tell people, when I speak at conferences or with customers, you should feel uncomfortable. I just want to let you know that. No need to get angry. Don't call me aggressive. My job is an agent for change. I'm very passionate. I raise my voice. Most people don't know that women, when we raise our voices, it's because we're excited. It's not because we're angry. But I am an agent for change. You should feel uncomfortable during this talk. That's normal. Just buckle up your seatbelts. Many of the other speakers I've been friends with for years, and they know this already. So a little bit about me. My hands are very dirty, and I always say I'm wet from the industry still, even though I work at Autodesk. And I worked at the government of Singapore actually for several years as their prefabrication expert as a consultant, watching that journey from the very beginning, as you were talking about. It was a very interesting thing to be a part of, to see how much money, how much effort, and how much time they've actually put into what they're doing there and what the results have really become. I think that's really interesting. I'm also a big proponent of the trade contractors, and I love manufacturing. So I'm seeing a lot of changes these days as subcontractors become the new manufacturers, and building product manufacturers put pressure down on subcontractors as they make larger and larger assemblies. So I really have had a very lucky career to see this from a very global perspective, and also a very 360 perspective from many different stakeholders, having worked for lots of large tech big owners, big general contractors, and governments. And now I'm here at Autodesk. And the reason I came to Autodesk is I truly believe, and they convinced me really to come here, because my passion for wanting to change this world and this ecosystem, not this industry, because we're really a collection of industries. I really felt the only place I could have the greatest impact was here at Autodesk. So I've been here a little over a year. Our industrialized construction strategy is really just to make DFMA and prefabrication easier for everybody. I'll define DFMA for you in a little bit, and you'll be surprised probably at my definition that has been evolving. But we also want to connect the Autodesk platform with this industrialized construction ecosystem. And we want to create a collaborative community where you can have a centralized knowledge base. Interestingly enough, I think I told Shirley this, we have actually just been producing a master's level course at Autodesk in my spare time, because I feel like education is so important that we've been making these videos for different topics around industrialized construction, things like convergence and platform and machine learning and AI, so that we could open source them to universities like yours once they're launched, so you could have access to them, all of these courses with some of the speakers that I know from around the world, and seeing some of the tech that matches it. So keep your eyes open for that, Shirley. That's coming out soon. So you may or may not have heard this word convergence. And if you've heard this word, I was really struck by this, and people are talking about this all over the world. What's converging? Technology is converging. This is no longer my phone. This is my computer and my phone and my GPS. It's everything, right? It's not siloed technology anymore. We're seeing lots of examples of that. Process is converging. I like to say this is industrialized construction is watching design, make, and operate actually converge into one process that we need to understand. And we're also seeing industries converge, right? So you're seeing manufacturing converge with construction, but we're also seeing manufacturing converge with design, more importantly. And we're seeing this happen across our ecosystem, this convergence. I like to define my customers as anyone that has integrated some sort of manufacturing process or fabrication process into what they're doing, whether that's design, make, or operate, is one of my convergence customers, right? So you'll hear me talk a lot about convergence customers that have that red thread running through their processes of what they're doing at their business. So this is a formula I live my life by, right? So those of you who know me know I speak about this all the time at every conference I'm at. If you truly want to change the way things are done, whether you're a country or a person or a company, this is a formula. And actually, funny enough, to my women that are in the audience, this was a woman that came up with this formula that then they forgot she came up with it. She sort of had a resurgence. They reminded people it was her formula. Maybe that's also why I like it. I always think well-behaved women rarely make history. So I love the fact that they brought her formula back. And I live by this. So it's about change. First, in order to change, you have to have dissatisfaction. If you're making tons of money and everybody is happy and everyone loves their whatever they're doing, it's really hard to get people motivated to change. So you first have to understand what the dissatisfaction is and understand, and I don't want to say exploit it, but really uncover it and make people understand the true pain of dissatisfaction. Then you have to have vision. You have to know that it's not just enough to be unhappy. You have to see a potential for what this world could actually look like. And then you need first concrete steps of action, because without that, people get very frustrated if they just see the new possible that's out there without understanding how to get there. I want to give you some of those steps today. And all of that has to be greater than resistance. So as most of you know, if you're a change agent, an agent for change, it's like putting on a backpack full of heavy rocks for a lifetime, running uphill and swinging a giant sword pretty much 12 hours a day. And so I'm tough. Don't worry. I'm from New York, actually, originally, and I was a competitive rugby player union for 15 years. So I think that's why I'm an agent for change. I've been against tougher. So I always say, like, I can change governments and companies and countries. I'm okay. But I have a pretty heavy backpack. If you're in your organization and you want to be an agent for change, get ready. You're going to need heavy shoulders. So I want to talk a little bit about this transformation framework, right? How do you get to that place? What is important to us? I hear a lot of people talking about outcomes, outcome-based design, outcome-based construction projects. These are some of the outcomes I have found from actually our outcomes framework between manufacturing, design, and construction. I've sort of taken a convergence look at some of those with our customers and said, these are the outcomes I'm seeing my convergence customers really want. Okay, so that's great. We know what we want. We have an understanding of potentially a vision. But you need a strategy to get there. It's not enough just to have that vision we talked about. And you need first steps of action. And some of those are going to be foundational steps. And I don't want to go too deep into this because I'm going to teach you some things in the middle of this presentation that I'll come back to some of this. But you'll need foundational skills and tools as well as processes. And you're going to need to understand a mindset of productization, a mindset of data reusability. So constantly think data reusability. Raise your hand and wave at me if you're an architect. I'm going to pick on some of you. Alon Nir, I know you're an architect. You look like an architect. Alon Nir, are you an architect? No? I see Yasha. Yasha's an architect. Listen, stop judging yourself on how much you can draw and start judging yourself on how many things you don't have to ever draw again. That is data reusability. And we don't get paid on not to draw. So we have to think about how that affects our business models, right? Start thinking, Yasha, what if I drew something once and I never had to draw it again and I could just keep reusing it? So physical productization, like a wall panel or a bathroom panel, but also digital productization is even more important. And then you're talking about things, once you can digitize those things, how do we automate them? How do we connect those processes together so that they are truly not just by hand, but we can make them, on our platform, enabled by the cloud, available to most stakeholders. Once you get that connection, you truly can use optimizing capabilities like industrialized construction and generative design and digital twins, right? So most people talk about, I want to have digital twins, and they forget they have all these steps in order to get there, and they just to be honest, sometimes people forget those first concrete steps and then they fail. And then they say industrialized construction didn't work, or, it's too hard to get through generative design, or I use that, I didn't understand, because we've missed some key steps in order to get to that optimization level. You don't get to, I always say, the first time you do things, it's not the best time you ever did it, right? So it's like you have to learn and get on this framework in order to get good at things. And there are some things you need to do before you get to actually optimize. Because what we're truly looking for me, is circularity, not just physical circularity within our product life cycles, so that we have a better, environment, not just, for what's in the landfills, but social sustainability. If you're in a particular industry sustainability, and economic sustainability for your country, if that's something that you're interested in. And we're talking from that level today. So you need that kind of circularity to understand how to rise up and actually get true sustainability, holistic sustainability. So now let's level set on a little bit of language. And I'm going to keep watching the chat too, if anyone throws in some questions, but I know we're going to have a question and answer session afterwards. So let's talk about the house that I see built, industrialized construction. I love lean manufacturing. I'm very into lean manufacturing, not so much lean construction. That's a difference, but I love lean manufacturing. And so you'll see this is a little homage to the house that Toyota built. And so I like to think of industrialized construction as the application of manufacturing techniques to the built environment, not just construction, design, make, operate. Manufacturing techniques applied to all three. In order to do that, you need enablers. And those enablers are both process and technology enablers. So things like IoT. I've written a couple papers where we're talking about autonomous buildings in the future that are adapting to the end user's preferences while we're in it, and also preventative maintenance type things where it's speaking to us. We need to embed IoT in order to have things like that, as well as digital twin. And also, that data and analytics that comes from that. That's a big technology enabler, being able to share data. I know we say data is the new oil, right? It's a good thing for Israel. Data is the new oil. If anybody wants to think data is the new oil, it should be Israel. So let's think about how do we use data to get better at what we're doing so we can be more predictive, more certain, create simulations, things like that. And then obviously the cloud, as we've learned, if you haven't been paying attention during this pandemic, the cloud is obviously important to our resiliency and our sustainability as an ecosystem, but it's also going to be there so that we need to be able to share data more easily and readily across stakeholders, even when we're not in a pandemic. And then we also have process enablers, things like lean manufacturing. Again, I think very important to what we're doing here. It's not enough just to open up a warehouse and throw a bunch of contractors inside. That's not industrialized construction. That's just throwing a bunch of contractors into a warehouse to build under a roof. So that's important to note. Building information modeling, Connected BIM, and Phil Bernstein, a colleague of mine, he had a vision for connected BIM. And I think we've achieved some of it. I think industrialized construction actually realizes BIM is like the highway we built. Industrialized construction are putting fast cars down it, right? It's like, why have a highway if you don't have fast cars going down it? It was just the beginning, but we need multi-dimensional data, not just geometric in shape, but things like computational design and things like that will actually give us better information about bill of process, bill of materials and things like that. So building information modeling in totality as connected BIM as a concept, very important. Design for manufacturing and assembly. Hear that word I just said, design for manufacturing and assembly. This is the first time I'm going to say this publicly. I am no longer going to be utilizing that phrase anymore. Where's Ryan Smith, my friends, and Alan? People that I've known for years that are on here. I am no longer going to say the word design. Why? Because it's not about really design for manufacturing and assembly. It's about data. Data. We are held back in this ecosystem because we keep thinking this is design-led. And we look to our designers to start designing to enable manufacturing and assembly. And they're like looking around saying like, I don't know how this thing is built. And I'm not sure about the supply chain that supports that. And you've seen my great friend, Jamie Johnson, over at Bryden Wood. And even he had to go one supply chain partner at a time to understand the data. It is not design anymore for manufacturing and assembly. It's data. And we need to really recognize this if we want to move that forward. First time ever said in public here. Just so you know, I wanted to make sure I saved something really special for you guys. And It's about the physicality of this prefabrication continuum. This word offsite, and honestly, eventually this word prefab, they won't exist. Offsite is just location-specific prefabrication or location-specific manufacturing. By the way, my friends in the UK, they use the word DFMA as the whole entirety of the process. That's also not right. So every time we say the word DFMA from now on, we're all going to think this is the data we need in order to enable manufacturing and assembly. But in that prefabrication continuum, you have things like advanced building products that reduce drying time, curing time, welding time, hot work, single trade assemblies, things like pipe spools or electrical whips, or even light gauge frame panels are in that single trade category. Multi-trade assemblies, so things like head walls, medical head walls, risers, racks, bathroom pods, anything that has multi-trade within it, operating room ceilings, skids for power skids and things like that have controls, and central utility plants are in there as well. And then you have volumetric modules. So those modules actually are the structure of the building and hopefully include lots of other things from the continuum inside them. So again, we're not trying to build boxes that are then conventionally constructed, but just like that, we can also do in situ structure and include a lot of our assemblies inside in situ. And sometimes that's the best option. This is not a hierarchy. That's the one thing I always teach. Volumetric modular is not at the top. There is no such thing. It's whatever tools you have in your toolkit that actually meet the requirements of the parameters you need for that project. So don't think modular is the end all be all. It is not. And by the way, very expensive air doesn't ship very far. So if you're in Israel right now and you want to have an export community of what you're doing, empty boxes don't ship very far. Very complex assemblies ship around the world. Think about it like that. That is why it is not a hierarchy. And then we want to apply things, advanced building techniques like robotics and automation and additive manufacturing. You need the data for these things in order to have 3D printing, in order to have machines on site, in order to have machines within your factory. So keep thinking, I'm going to drive that today home. That data makes all of this work, right? So if I would love feedback, if you love that or hate that, I would love to hear it in the chat, because I'm telling you, I am full board talking about the data from now on, I've realized. So let's keep going. And here's my proof that it needs to be data-led. This is our company and our products. If you think of any phasing you've seen in how buildings are designed, what does it always start with? Design. We say the word design, even as I'm explaining that. I'm actually retraining myself to say, you don't start with design. You have to first define products. And those products are done in manufacturing data so that we can create actually bill of process, bill of material, all the things. By the way, the reason design for manufacturing and assembly will go away as a concept is those rules are going to be embedded within the product, within the technology that communicates that product, that is accessible to then inform the design. Right? You will, as a designer, be able to access that information, that productized information, to inform your design. Products first, inform design second. If we don't get this, we will never succeed on this planet. I've put the owners up here kind of off to the side because many of them are creating playbooks and decoupling process into product. They're an influencer here, just like Autodesk, in creating playbooks full of products that they have defined. Either think brand standards for Marriott, think data center pieces and parts for some of our largest data center builders. Those products, or semiconductor fab facilities, they are decoupling process into product. You've seen a lot of stories about that. The biggest innovations right now, and this is great for what you do in your country, is that the best innovations around the high tech. Most of the prefabrication is happening in single and multi-trade around this world. That's where the growth is. Don't think boxes. Think high-tech integrated assemblies. Those owners that are the serial owners, hospitals, manufacturers, digital infrastructure, they need those assemblies to be high-tech. They need them to be certain. And so they're influencing these products that are being defined, which then you can eventually inform your design. We need to make them based on the data that exists, and you need to assemble them. There will always, at the moment, be some on-site activities, but most of my general contractors are seeing themselves as systems integrators, not as general contractors anymore. I just sat in a meeting with about 30 general contractors, and somebody asked the question, what does the general contractor look like in 30 years from now? And this is true. Daphne, you'll love this. A woman was in my breakout session and all these people were saying, we'll do this, we'll be like this. And she said, honestly, I don't think we're going to exist. She was brave enough to say, I don't think we will exist unless we change, unless we truly become systems integrators. The word general contractor will not be a breath. It will never say those words anymore. And I thought that was very, and she said, I don't know if I want to go back into the big room and say that in front of all these other presidents, but she was right. We have to evolve what our current ecosystem, not industries, because we are a siloed cash for chaos ecosystem. Lots of you, sorry, my architects, get paid to draw things that'll never be built. Lots of us in general contractors get paid to estimate things that'll never be built like that. Lots of my subcontractors are not making the best manufacturing pieces and parts because they're way at the end of the process. So we're not getting the efficiency there. We have to close this cash for chaos ecosystem by moving the data that is necessary up front. We have to do this, and it must be shared across, for us in Forge, we're using things like BIM 360 across all the stakeholders. We must do that. And by the way, in our space, we have fantastic manufacturing tools. What we need today are not the greatest bells and whistles on the, I always say, like, don't bring an arsenal to a water pistol fight. Right now, we just need to become manufacturers and understand the data. And we need that data to connect. The connection is more important than the capability almost at this point. We need product-led, connected, informed products to inform design to make and assemble. And I hope that makes sense to you guys. I want to make sure it doesn't. I'm hoping any questions you have, I'm happy to answer. So what does that mean to have a product-led mindset? And this is a maturity matrix that says right now in prefabrication around the world, we sort of live here because it's so downstream. It's the first time they've ever built that assembly, and it's not exactly how they would build it if they were up front. And by the way, I came to Autodesk because the answer can't be move the people up front. I'm 50 years old this summer. I'm tired of moving to the front. I want what's in my head and the data that I know to be applied up front using machine learning and AI. We are an aging out ecosystem of talent. If we don't move this up front, we are in trouble. And so sometimes we get repeatable assemblies right now, which is why we see sometimes prefab is working, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes we have good results, sometimes we don't. But you have to get beyond that to a defined product, a managed product, so that you can optimize that product. That will truly unlock the benefits of productization compared to process, right? That's very important. We need productization because it is the single most impactful thing for environmental sustainability today. What do I mean by that? We need it because 40% of what's in our landfills is solid waste coming from the construction industry. Why? I'm the queen of prefab. I just redid my house. I have a dumpster, a garbage bin outside on my driveway. It has my old bathroom and half of my new bathroom products in it. And I'm the queen of prefab. I can't even get a prefabricated bathroom in my home. Why? We haven't moved to productization accessible to all. And by the way, that's for a consumer. We don't even have that for commercial availability at the moment. So we truly need to move to productization because digital waste leads to physical waste. Productization is going to remove that 40% out of our landfills more than anything, more than any R rating, more than any material change, more than anything you could possibly think about. Productizing versus process is going to get rid of that waste. So keep that in mind. That's why we're doing this. Aside from productivity, aside from safety, aside from all these other reasons, we need to save the planet. And so, by the way, we've heard this. This is actually old now. I think it's over the next 12 years. We're going to see almost half of our AEC value, $14 trillion, is going to shift to industrialized construction. Much of that is going to be towards assemblies and not necessarily volumetric modules. If you read this report, the part that people don't look at in this chart is there are both winners and losers. If you're in the losing category in red, you better figure out what your new value proposition is, like that woman who said, I don't think we're going to exist. And so you can see, not only are there winners and losers, there's a lot of value up for grabs here in this corner. If you get good at this, or you have a new value proposition, you can take that value. The other thing that's worth noting is you're not going to do this without tech. Even though it's a small percentage of spend, it doubles in this future of what you have to spend in order to enable this. I think that is a little bit low because I don't think we were enabling. They're talking about productization and digitization in this, but they don't take it to a level of ecosystem necessarily in this. So I think you're going to see that as well. You'll at least double your tech spend. So I like to be, I'm the harder the truth to tell, the truer the friend that will tell you. Like, I'm going to tell you all the hard, tough things today that you need to hear. Singapore did not do that for free, by the way. They spent over 600 million Sing for years and did learning journeys and hired people like me. So if you think it like they waved their magic fairy wand and all of a sudden like they were the number one like cluster for innovation, that didn't happen. I can tell you, it was a very hard road that was very expensive. So there is a difference between productization and prefabrication. Prefabrication looks just like this. This one happens to be HT lines. I lost my little captions there, but they did that, yes, they got someone to the front of the process. That's a central utility plant. They probably won't ever make one just like that ever again because they had some geometric constraints by the time they got involved. Unlike a product like this Kohler generator in this case, right? That is a product. Yasha, you never wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to make a 217.5 horsepower generator today. I don't care what FG Wilson makes. I want a 217.5, right? You never do that. You have a 200, a 250, a 300, and you design around those capacities, right? We need to do the same. Unless your product is like a generator in that mindset, you have not productized. If they wake up in the morning and think they can adjust everything you're doing just because, we've made a mistake. Now, by the way, I'm sure somebody, Yasha, will make you a 217.5. It doesn't cost what the 200 or the 250 costs. It's a lot more money. Where my women at, that's like buying something at the Gap versus having couture made for you for the one-off dress. The one-off dress is always much more expensive than going to shop at the Gap. We should know that. That's like doing that. So I like a lot of fashion. So I make a lot of fashion analogies, but we are basically buying couture every day in prefabrication these days. We are making one-offs all the time. Why is it more expensive? That's why. But these are not more expensive. These have cost certainty. We know exactly what these cost. We know exactly the capacity. We know exactly what the inputs and outputs of this are, and we design around them, right? That's the difference. We are currently making snowflakes every day. Snowflakes, like couture, are very expensive and they melt. They don't last very long, for the record. Somebody just said that in my conference yesterday. So I thought it was very funny. They said, and they melt. So, all right, we have to stop asking for snowflakes, designing with snowflakes, building snowflakes. We just have to stop. So let's talk about what that means from productization perspective. I said you have to productize, right? You have to define that central utility plant, let's call it that. In this case, I used a precast panel and an MEP head wall. This is the part that's really hard for people to get their minds around. I used to use the term neurological pathways until somebody else kind of took it from me. And I was like, fine, let's just call them workflows for now. People understand what that means. But the way I first started describing this concept is that it's not one workflow. You need multiple workflows for multiple products because they have a different DNA, right? That's why I love neurology about it. They had like one has MEP in their DNA, the other one has structure in their DNA for concrete. And so you first have to define the physicality of that product, like that generator. And then you have to define the workflow that you need to go across in order to have it conceptualized all the way to operate, right? And where that happens, now that I've rearranged the pieces, right? I say this is like chess, but it used to be set up to play mahjong. And now I'm rearranging the pieces to play chess. But because I've rearranged the pieces and put defining products up front and then informed make and assemble, we have some potential disconnects in the workflows that we need to map out for each of these products. Not one. It's like building a library, one digital book at a time. And those are important. And when we recognize that we may have gaps, we have to fill them either. And this is where your secret sauce is. Every one of you, you don't have to raise your hand now. Lots of my customers are like, we're going to build our own software. We're going to do, and I'm like, great, what's it going to do? Well, guess what? If it does one of these major things that people have giant products that have been around for, have tons of money in them, don't. But if you want to build products that actually fix one of these little tiny little connective tissue gaps, build it. And by the way, that is a secret sauce that you will be incredibly successful at. You should literally think about connective tissue between these workflows we need to map out and we need to understand where they are, right? That is the part that has gotten really hard here, why this has been hard for people to do, is that needs to be first productized physically, and then that workflow needs to be digitally productized. And then you can fill it in, those connective tissues in our case, we have an open platform with any one of our partners or something that you do proprietarily, or we can buy something if it's a big enough priority that we need to fill that gap for our customers. You have to recognize, and Alan, where are you? I know you're here. We talk about Autodesk being an open platform. That's why I came here, because truly you can have anyone working within these spaces that you want within those connective tissues. And that's the thing that's really missing. We're not missing products on the big chunks anywhere around the world, regardless if it's ours or somebody else's. We're missing the connective tissue. Think like that. And then For us, it actually works on our Forge platform, which is what connects things together. If you're actually building something, think about building it with Forge as a developer, because it will connect to the other tools that a lot of people are using around the world in this convergence conversation, like Revit, like the Autodesk Construction Cloud, like our PLM software in our or Inventor in our manufacturing tools. If you build something on Forge, it can speak to those just because you built it on Forge. So let's go back to this transformation framework. As a company or a country or any group that you're involved in, you need foundational skills, tools, and processes. I just said a lot of stuff. One of the things you should know is if you want to be a manufacturer, what manufacturing capabilities do you have? One of my favorite assessments that we talk about is manufacturing readiness. You can afford to buy a 6-axis arm robot potentially, which is a level 4 piece of robotics and automation. You might not have the culture and the skill set and the org structure to support a 6-axis arm robot on day one. And it's going to be a very expensive coat rack in your factory. Like I say, my treadmill sometimes becomes my hanger for my clothing. This will be a very expensive coat rack in your factory. So not only do you need manufacturing readiness, you need industrialized construction readiness, you need culture readiness. You need to make sure that you're thinking differently, your culture. By the way, I always say it's not hard to prefabricate a pipe. It's hard to have a culture and leadership and processes that enable you to prefabricate that pipe. Prefabricating the pipe is easy. It's everything else that stands in our way, right? So you need those foundational skills and tools. And by the way, tech is one of those. One of the things I focus on in the convergence consulting group here at Autodesk, which can help you on this journey, is what is your systems architecture right now and where do your skill sets lie? If you have a giant chasm in the middle of that workflow I just showed, that's something we need to know. And this is sort of the only Autodesk-y thing I probably say, which is I'm connecting all of our products within the portfolio within this platform. My first goal is not to displace one of the hero products. So if you're not using one of those right now for a good period of time, you will have a giant chasm. So the one thing I always say to people on the technology side is I am connecting our portfolio of products that have a connected ecosystem. You need skills in those if you want to make those connections in those products that we're going to be connecting. And then again, thinking about that data reusability, I saw a lot of people shaking their heads when I said reusability, not just physical, think digital. One of my good friends did a multi-billion-dollar hospital and they showed me all this great VD&C for it for like 2 hours. I sat through all this cool stuff. And I asked him at the end, how much of this can you use for your next hospital? And it was as if I slugged him in the gut with a baseball bat. And he said, none of it. And I said, wow, what a shame. So those are your first steps to think about. And then digitizing things, not just getting off paper, but enabling automation, connected process, enabling platform thinking, and sorry, I've lost my optimization. And you also want to look for circularity. I think again, circularity, even if you're not into sustainability, circularity is for productivity, for both economic, sustainability for you and social sustainability. Listen, we are not getting young people to look to our ecosystem for jobs because we have not enabled enough tech in it. In the Queen of Prefab video series, if you want to look it up, I'll send you a link. There was a 23-year-old operator of a Tiger Stop machine in one of my manufacturing facilities for an MEP subcontractor. I said, how do you like running this machine? He's like, it's great. I've learned how to do it off my iPad. I'm the only one in this place that knows how to do it. And I said, that's great. And he said, yeah, it's better than hanging drywall. And for him, not that drywall is not a great skill. I don't want all the drywallers to write me. But for a 23-year-old, he'd rather work with his iPad, understanding this piece of automation than hanging drywall. That's important to them. We should know that for sustainability of our industry, in this case, our ecosystem that we're in. That's truly what the new possible looks like. Let me say something now, country specific. And this, I have a whole presentation and a whole study we're doing on this as well. Think about innovation, industrialized construction clusters. We've mentioned Singapore several times. And, Simi and Senate say an innovation cluster is a large number of interconnected industrial and or service companies having a high degree of collaboration, typically through a supply chain and operating under some market conditions. Those of you who know my professor at HBS, Michael Porter, talks a lot about this stuff. I want to talk about it differently. They talk about it mostly competitive advantage. Yes, for countries, sometimes like Silicon Valley, but it's different for us. This technology transfers, it's physical. It is a very old, there are a bunch of old industries within these new industries within our ecosystem, and we have different constraints and enablers, right? So if you think about Singapore as an industrialized construction cluster, I remember the first time I ever said, you guys are going to be the Silicon Valley of industrialized construction. Chairman Kung actually was like, let's talk about us like that. He loved that. He loved the fact that we were like going to think about them as a cluster, right, of innovation. You truly do need institutional, like the university that we're here with, and also government. We need regulation. We need acceptance. And just like we're getting here today, we need influence. Academia can give such influence to these initiatives. That is a big player within the Singapore conversation. Don't discount what academia can do when it comes to really influencing what your country or your company can do. That's so important. Culture of innovation and competition. And Shirley knows this. I wasn't going to release this stuff at this show, but I said, if I don't do this in Israel, why wouldn't I talk about innovation, clusters for IC in Israel? You are so positioned to do something fantastic in this space because you have a culture of innovation and competition, right? It's ingrained within your being, within your everyday life of technology and innovation and competitive advantage that as a society, what's the book? I forgot the name. It's like more things have been invented in Israel technology than anywhere else in the world, right? Somebody help me, correct me if they know the book that I'm talking about. If you don't have a culture of innovation and competition, I don't even know who might have better. So I decided to talk a little bit about it today. You also need a supply chain, either one that's mature in this space or some that has a transferable skill set. So I'll use the example of Australia for that. In Australia, they had the car companies leave, and they had lots of people that had building information modeling skill set that didn't go where the car companies when they left. Well, they could take those people and they could apply them to construction now because they had a transferable skill set within a supply chain that they could utilize. You have the same. I just told you this is technology and product led. You already have that transferable skill within the country in a supply chain that could support this when you're talking about productization. Local demand, Michael Porter said local demand is the most important. I don't agree, actually, for this. I think because we're able to ship, like I said to Daphne, the highly technical embedded assemblies elsewhere, you can export these. You need good local demand and you need export conditions that make sense. I know when I've tried to ship into Israel, that's very hard. Like it's very hard to take an assembly and ship it inside. I know I've worked with some semiconductor companies that were building within Israel, and that was a constraint for us. We couldn't actually get things that we made someplace else inside because you want to build it within Israel. Great. By the way, that goes to your culture of innovation and competition. Fantastic. Step up, start building things. I don't need to ship anything into you. You can ship everything out, right? That's fantastic. But you also need capital. Everyone forgets this costs money, and you need an infrastructure, and you need workforce, and you need technology supporting this. And if you don't recognize that, it will be a very hard road. And so you need to know you're on a journey. You've got to put on that backpack and you've got to get ready because it's not going to be transformational in one day. So that I want to let everybody know that I'm here for you as a resource, but it's not that quick. Just so you know, it does take time, and you need to first recognize what the journey is and what you have within these forces and drivers that can actually make you successful. Because if you don't have some, the good news is you can actually manufacture some of these enablers. And if you have some constraints, you at least can recognize you need to remove some of the constraints, like in Singapore, where they did incentivizing, of companies 10 million Sing just to utilize some of this technology, or they changed the building code to you had to use some of this in order to get a building permit. You can change and manufacture some of these things if you recognize what's holding you back or what's helping, right? So the last thing I'll say is, what can we do for you at Autodesk? And what can I do for you? First of all, everyone on this call that knows me knows I'm always a friend. You can always talk to me. I'll always help you. I respond to most people on LinkedIn all the time, although I'm a little behind right now. I'm not going to lie, for about a week. And we can always talk at events. It's very hard for me to say no, as Shirley will tell you, but we can also do corporate exec briefings as well as internal trainings. The product side, I believe truly this is about platform integration. If you have technology that's one of those connective tissues, you can partner with us. We can talk about M&A. We can understand. I can promote it if it's something that I need with my customers. And if you are a service provider, we have convergence consulting. Listen up, Ryan. I forgot to tell you this part too. We haven't talked in a while, Ryan. We have convergence consulting where we want to use outside consultants that we're going to use. So once they understand the systems architecture, there are specialists in certain areas across this platform that you need. Not one company will have them all. Just like I say in software, not one ring to rule them all. If anybody tells you they have one product that makes this work, absolutely run away, That is not going to happen. I love my friend Phil, but he talked about BIM. They bought Revit. That solved the problem. This is not that. If somebody tells you this, think about my ring. It's not the answer. You need, we have convergence consulting for you. There's tons of research projects. Surely tons of research things we can put people up for. And then we also have our technology centers. So you can be now a digital resident of our technology centers. And we're looking for areas to create clusters around. And I think we actually sort of have a mini cluster, I know, in Israel of these technology centers and where these residents reside. So that's really important to work with us through that way. But there's so many ways to work with us. This is all of my stuff, only if you want to personally reach out to me over, look at TikTok, but I do have a pretty big following there. But really, it's my Instagram, my LinkedIn, and Twitter. That's where you want to stay on the business side of things over there on LinkedIn. But feel free to reach out to me because I'm really here to help you at Autodesk. And I'm open to taking questions, Shirley. I hope I stayed within my time. It was, I tried my best. How's that?
You were great, Amy. Thank you so much. It was really fascinating and interesting, really. Thank you so much. So now we have time for questions. So who wants to ask first? You just open your mic and ask.
Don't be afraid, I promise.
Amy, I wrote a question in the chat box. And my question is, as a road engineer, not an architect, if industrialized construction is also applicable to infrastructure projects like urban street construction and or road construction, or is it just for buildings?
No, fantastic question. Actually, there's a ton going on for underground for infrastructure as well. You know, we just bought Innovize, which is one of the largest purchases ever for water side. There's especially like really heavy industrial, anything underground, like bridges and tunnels, tons of stuff. I actually have my phone. I'm not allowed to show it now. I just asked them, friends around the world, send me pictures of their cool projects. One yesterday is about a tunnel project, and they're showing me all the cool MEP within the tunnel that they put, as well as the concrete. So like, yes, anything this can be applied to for sure. Transit, I've done tons of like railway projects in the past, airports, underground, industrial, tons of stuff, right? So think anytime there's complexity, anytime you have a shortage of manpower, anytime you can create pieces and parts, it's applicable. But a great question, especially underground. I love it for underground. It's one of my favorite things when you need things that you can build offsite concurrently and then just bury as you're thinking about the rest of the project. So yeah, great question, Payam.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question here from Ketan Gupta. He's asking how 4D can be used for rail infrastructure projects. I think you just.
I mean, well, it's great. Like we've done so many of them. Actually, prefabrication and utilizing things like 4D. I mean, again, you need to utilize 4D when you're thinking about for clash detection and for scheduling and all of this has been done. Like that's the other thing I'm going to tell you. Interesting that before you go down a path and think it's never been done before, it probably has. So stand on the shoulders of jobs that have been done. There's tons of rail infrastructure that has utilized IC before you think you have to kind of start from scratch. And that's something I'm trying to capture at the Knowledge Center within Autodesk. But great question.
Can I have one as well?
I love it.
So first of all, thank you, Amy, for the presentation. Really interesting. One of the hottest topics recently in the construction industry is sustainability. Do you feel or already have experience with prefabrication supporting the sustainability, or have some comparison between prefabricated versus on-site construction when it comes to sustainability?
There are a lot of case studies and metrics out already about that. One that I believe we just are showing at, I want to say at AU, showed a 40% reduction in trash on the job site. So I love that number because it matches what we talked about, but in some ways. But I think, just a lot more about waste reduction, and they're able to utilize better products because they're products as opposed to trying to figure it out on site. But there's a lot of case studies around sustainability with IC. What's kind of strange about it is that in general, people sort of don't look at it holistically. So like I'll see something about IC and sustainability, but at the same time, they were utilizing like unbelievable tech. They don't really talk about that part. Like I just read something about BIM to construction, and I know the company they're talking about only prefabricates, but they don't really even say the words prefabricated. If they were just talking about BIM to construction, is it? So I think we've sort of like forgotten that this is not about the silos, right? You're really thinking about the end outcomes for all. So it's not about, by the way, I always say, if you're getting on this journey to save money, first thing, get off the journey, because like this is about certainty. This is about learning. Anytime you do something for the first time, I love the book It Starts With One. It talks about the fact that there's a learning curve that you have to get over. We're so project centric. That's why we need institutions to step in and governments to step in to say, we're going to supplement this learning this way, or we're going to help you get that curve a little more shallow. But there are tons of sustainability articles and things that are out there. If you just look up sustainability and prefabrication, some are coming out of Singapore, a lot out of Australia right now, some out of the US, again, a lot out of Europe. Like in the US, they don't have actually as many regulations. So the more regulated companies when it comes to carbon have the better studies.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy, for a fantastic talk. Coming from the academia, I'd like to say to you that we would really love to step in and maybe talk about, maybe later and maybe not now, but talk about research that we could, I don't know, somehow do some kind of a collaboration. Of course, we are, as you see, we are implementing this knowledge step by step in teaching, but it's very important for us also to get into the research part. So maybe talk about collaboration and research.
Absolutely. So by the way, we're happy to do that. We have lots of academic partners that we work with people. Happy to do it offline with you for sure. We have lots of opportunities and we love partnering with great institutions. Somebody asked me about maintenance. I can quickly answer. The whole point of digital twins is not for as-built. The whole point of digital twins is to have preventative maintenance information. In that data, you also need the maintenance information, just like you need the sustainability information around that product. So don't think of it just as bill of process. Sustainability data, maintenance data, sensors and things like that need to be embedded in that so you can have a better maintenance presence afterwards. So love the question on maintenance. Happy, Shirley, if you cut me off, keep asking questions, just up to you guys, however you want me. I blocked some time out for you guys.
I think
Let me ask the question quickly.
Yeah, I think we have time for just one question and that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Amy. What's your experience with demountability? See, with prefab and modularization, it's one thing to smartly put something together, put the building together, but if you want to take part of it with you somewhere else, and how viable is that? Like, what do you and there's a lot of talk about demountability, but not really much of an appetite on it. You don't see that much of an appetite often, at least in certain parts of the world. What's your experience? Where do you see it?
Yeah, I actually started using the phrase years ago called design for manufacturing assembly, which I'll now say data, for disassembly and reuse. So DFMA-DR, disassembly and reuse. Now, I've done that in the past. We've actually moved airport in the Middle East. Actually, I did it. I put an airport down. Years later, came back, moved it to a different location, right? For the government, actually, in that case. I think you'll see some of that. Like what I did was a little bit different. That was for a specific purpose built for reuse, disassembly and reuse. I think what you're going to see, and I am seeing now, is the 50-year lifespan building is sort of like, like my phone doesn't last 50 years. I need to swap tech. Very few things on this planet do I even want to be tied into a 50-year technology. I think we're seeing now that DFMA-DR is being used now for technology swaps, scalability, and also for capacity growth, or never having to grow capacity. So things like data centers or even office buildings, where we're decoupling the systems around MEP, and we're thinking about the structure separate from the systems that can be reused, right? Or taken apart and reused. So DFMA-DR is that concept. I'm seeing more of that, mostly from the big guys that have flexible reuse as they have more and more assets that they don't know how the world is going to change. Data centers, I see a ton of it around data centers and a ton of it around big spaces where people own large real estate portfolios, medical as well. Think anything swapping technology. Remember, we sort of like build these buildings, then we pour in the MEP systems and integral weaving, woven. How do you swap that out? It's very hard to upgrade that system when it's so interwoven to the fabric of the 50-year lifespan building. So I think that is a fairly new thing that's happening on a trend. I think you're going to see more of it. By the way, it happens more when you start productizing. They go, wait a minute, I don't need to design that. I just stick it on the outside. That riser is always like, you take it off and put it back on and I grow the capacity. It's like generators, right? Like you can always swap generators or have generators daisy chained. It's going to be more like that the more we productize, but I am seeing a trend and a shift in that direction.
Amy, thank you so much for your talk. It was fascinating and amazing, and I hope you can stay with us for Alan's talk. But if not, it was great that you have been with us.
Thank you.
Last hour.
I'll say one last thing before I leave. I usually talk about a story called The Art of Sound. If you look it up, I want my architects to remember, I'm doing this to free you up to spend time on the absolutely beautiful custom parts of your building that you actually became an architect to build. None of you like drawing fire stairs. Productize the things you don't care about so you can be enabled and freed to make beautiful buildings without having to draw the things you don't care about. I want to make it so that you can actually focus on the end user experience, not just talk about it. How's that?
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So thank you for Amy. And now, sorry, let me introduce you to our next speaker. Mr. Alan Waha is the global lead for digital transformation at Buro Happold. He convenes the technology strategy board and steers a number of technology initiatives. He is also co-founder of Cogital, which specializes in digital transformation, strategy, and ventures incubation in PropTech and BuildTech. Alan joined the construction industry in 2008 after a career in aerospace and automotive. His experience spans the AEC supply chain across Europe, US, and Asia. Alan is looking for an open discussion with you all, so don't hesitate to open your mic to ask questions while he's talking and actively participate. There will be also time for questions in the end. So Alan, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And hi from London. It's my luck that the first time Technion invites me, and that is the second time an architectural school invite me. There we go. I'm locked in London. But absolute pleasure. Thank you very much to the dean and the vice dean. It's really a great pleasure to be. I feel like I'm in Israel today. A land of technology, land of contact, so very excited. And I didn't want to just have some kind of random presentation, so I very much look forward very selfishly to your questions, to the nutrients, and to the conversation. And to get us started, I have a few slides. I also received a list of questions. Thank you, Shirley. So I thought I'd try to answer the questions, but hopefully more questions will arise. To introduce myself a little bit less formally, let's see if this works. And so that you can put context, I see myself as a digital agitator that's arrived in construction by accident. It feels like yesterday, but it was 2006. And so where I find myself is talking to Contech, and Israel figures there very strongly, and looking at how we mobilize technology. I have made mine the topic of digital transformation. I came from automotive, where we did business model transformation and the like. And I try to engage with firms that are like-minded. And I think I'm in very good company and with friends and some of my heroes in the room. And so I've been very fortunate to have many conversations over the world with people that are trying to do what we're talking about today. And then every so often you have to do it yourself, right? Don't just talk about it. And so I'm very fortunate that Buro Happold gave me that stage. For the last 4 or 5 years, we've made a journey together. And more recently, and I want to share that, the experience in the UK at creating one of those innovation cluster called the Construction Innovation Hub that's really attacking industrialized construction at a market scale. And so, I'll be guided by your by your questions. I think the place to start is, I actually think it's about design. I think it's about data as well. And I'd like to have a design conversation today. You know, I'd like also to say this is not a new problem. I think economists in the UK certainly, and I'm really pleased that Raphael is in the room. You know, we talk about the sector being systemically locked, and you know, we've been asking ourselves, how can we do better? How can we do better? And you know, one answer, for example, in the UK has been this BIM wedge, and we were going to do everything through BIM. And what my observation is that has a focus on information exchange if you do it at the policy level. So that lower layer. So we talk about, you know, BIM 4D, BIM 3D, BIM users of cost, etc. But actually, it tended to ignore what's really happening at site, the reality of design and construction. And you know, I'm anchored on the view that if we don't change something, expecting a different answer is just pure insanity. So you know, BIM in the sense of it's a strategy, as Phil Bernstein envisages, is probably right, but as a reality of just digitizing the existing process is just insanity. And a second topic that obviously occupies us today is, you know, why don't we industrialize construction if we know what we mean by industrialize? And I think that problem has been solved. We know how to industrialize construction. We've built out of containers, we've built out of prefab, we've built out of modular, and we've built Vladivostok and East Berlin. So the problem ain't, can we industrialize construction, but can industrialized construction be made to be productive, useful, beautiful, and produce a vernacular? So industrializing a process, but simplifying it to a point where it's useless, has been proven to work. It's a societal failure, but it's an industrial success. So can we industrialize and today somehow overcome the challenges of previous attempts? I think that's really the exam question. Rather than answer my question, I received these questions, so please, you know, shoot away. But these were the top 5. Do you think that we are at the beginning of a revolution or an evolution? Do construction is an economy-driven process? Are we going to end up like the car industry? Can we break down the silos? And what are we left to do as architect and engineer? So you know, these were great questions. Assembled from my best of the slides I would use to answer those questions. But you know, these are just questions, and please go ahead. So for me, are we at the beginning of a revolution or a transformation? Starts with getting rid of all this BIM stuff. I think Amy was saying similar things. And just think about, for me, the fact that what BIM allows us to do is to really encode the information related to the object, the engineering, the design. We're semantically encoding the design. So you know, this goes right back to design computation, and Chuck Eastman. You know, it's all there. The fundamentals are there. But what's really interesting is that now that we've seen digital transformation of the music, of retail, and we've seen disruption of retail versus disruption of the music industry, we can apply, and here I apply the MIT framework to answer the question and say, you know, you can insert digital into a completely new state and a completely new market, or you can use digital to do better in the existing market, which is really interesting because, you know, the design computation movement that came out of UCL and Robert Age ask that very question. Should we, with our computational tools, insert ourselves in the existing stack? So that means create design tools like Revit that produce drawings, and realize that actually inserting ourselves in the existing state of construction doesn't change much? Or should we try to disrupt the industry, invent a completely new state, and act as insurgents? So you have a battle between insurgent and incumbents. It happens in every industry. The insurgents are great at innovating. They invent the future. They are, you know, unincumbent by what is, but they don't have customers. They don't have a capital base. They really have a hard job to acquire new customer, build a new brand, get an understanding of the market. The incumbents have all that, but they can't innovate. And really the battle between insurgents and incumbents boils down between, do you think our industry will see new entrants coming and showing the way, or the incumbents are going to be able to transform? The music industry, for example, we know was won by the insurgents because simply the incumbent, Sony Music and the like, just ignored for long enough. If you lure your customer, if you ignore what really is the purpose of your industry, then the person that has no right to come into your industry, that has no knowledge of it and no brands, eventually wins out. And you know, I can see both strategies coming. We've seen the Kateras, we've seen the O11H, we've seen the Romberg, we've seen the Goldbeck insurgents saying we're going to do it a new way. And we can see the incumbents. I can see Marja in the room, and Mace very much building an insurgent-like division inside the firm, and the incumbent saying really we should restate ourselves. And I think it's Mark Reynolds, the CEO of Mace, that only last week states that he sees his company as a sustainability and a data company that happens to make buildings. And I think that's really, really interesting when you get the CEO of one of the leading construction firms stating that they are not happy with the way they make money today, and they want to actually transform their firms. So who will win? What my hope is that the one that wins is the one that delivers a better built environment. So that was question number one. Just a question of scale, really interesting. Same study that Amy quoted a minute ago sees that between 5 and 15% of the market needs by 2035 will be delivered in this new mode. So there is a market out there. It's absolutely astronomical. And we see that up to 15% of real estate needs and 5% on industrial needs will be delivered by these transform type companies. And is this believable? If you see the amount of capital coming into Comtech and PropTech, I think the venture capital and the smart money believe that even if it's off by a couple of points, these are gigantic markets. So very, very interesting to integrate and say, do I want to be part of the future? Do I want to invent it as a designer, an architect, or do I just want to be a passenger that lives in the past? I did say I'm an agitator. So then the next question is, what triggers this? You know, ultimately money speaks. How do we disrupt an industry? Who do you think is the player that ignites change? It's for sure somebody that we don't know, somebody that's in a garage somewhere. That's the famous, you know, digital transformation and innovator dilemma. Bill Gates was asked whether he feared IBM or Apple more, and he was as often as he was right. He said, I fear two engineers in a garage that I don't know anything about, that are that are designing a product a category we don't know yet. And of course he was right, and they were called Sergey and Larry, and they created Google, which invented a business model that undermined fundamentally his operating system, its customer engagement, its business suites, and it stalled Microsoft for 15 years. So who are those? I don't know. What I believe is we need to encourage it. The size of the construction ecosystem is so large. So I'll advertise my paper here on industrialized construction supply chain that I wrote with Summit about a year ago. But it was built, as always is the case, on good academic research that you could borrow from or steal from or quote. So the University of Helsinki makes quite good analysis of possible scenarios of market transformation. In the UK, we believe into a market-driven transformation, and we as a part two to this BIM thing are saying, what if we could put the market into a context where it would industrialize? What would that look like? And the hypothesis is called platform construction design and platform construction systems. And the idea is to make manufacturing meet construction, and therefore put the construction market into a context where not only we can think about it in terms of made to order products, but those made to order products create markets against which an industrialized supply chain and industrialized manufacturing base would start to organize itself and improve the quality of the product. It's a £72 million program over 3 years that brings people from the industry together to say, what if we had a platform construction system that had a digital twin attached to it that would measure outcome, that would create a market demand for these products? And what's really interesting, when you looked at it in terms of, but what's the product here? The product is the space. A building is an assembly of spaces. And so if you think about space as a product and you say, right, I'm going to buy 35 billion worth of stuff, which part of this stuff makes spaces that repeat, that I can standardize in terms of needs? I can remove and reduce the unnecessary complexity. And when we talk unnecessary complexity, I can see Marcia shaking and saying, the hero line that I think everybody's talking about is the fact that we named 104 different ways to name toilet spaces. So, it's like we say, oh, we like the diversity of the built environment and it never repeats. I bet it never repeats. We've got 104 ways to describe the same thing. So, and actually, obviously there are some extraordinary toilets. I'm talking about those at the top of the chart, for example, but they are rare. It's rare that an architect designs the toilet experience as a, fundamental part of the building. So let's see if we can do better. And it was incredible to see that the demand actually can be rationalized, and then it becomes a question of creating a platform construction system. So a Lego, but not constrained by Lego and not designed by Lego, but a system against which you could place a demand, reaggregate the demand across the country, and say, now we're going to be able to create manufacturers that manufacture those components and systems that are assembled to make those spaces. And that's the exam question. It's a tall order in terms of analysis, but it means essentially this word platform is very important. And I want to run as quickly as possible. But platform in terms of supply chain platform and industry scale platforms into which people can then co-create. And so they become innovation platforms. So there's a transaction side from creating the demand, but the innovation side of how you meet that demand. And again, this is well researched by UCL, for example. And I'll just go quickly to say, so the market hypothesis we work again in this context is to try to make an open market ecosystem of productized systems and spaces that assemble into a diversity of building. We are going quite the opposite from, for example, a fully vertically integrated company like Katera or Goldbeck, which vertically integrate against a specific category and try to get integration efficiencies there rather than market efficiencies. And I was very much influenced by the work of Raphael on Nash equilibrium of supply chains to try to say, that's the hypothesis, create a completely new ecosystem. So that's what we mean by industrializing. We're creating a market for people to innovate and industrialize against. And obviously with the digital agitator badge, I think why today, and one thing that really we're trying to do is use and mobilize technology so that highly complex ecosystem can become self-organizing and can be orchestrated. Amy was talking about that glue, that data glue across the value chain. And in this case, we are creating not just kit of parts, but kit of rules that get encoded into the platform so that designers can check. And essentially, we are restating the manufacturability, the buildability of the building is restated computationally so that the design teams have things to press against. So that you are still expressing yourself, but now you are doing so by pressing against a digital medium where, yes, it's doable, and the consequence of this design and gestural choices are, and then you can push it contractually into the supply chain. And we built configurator for that, and to bring even more variability and efficiencies, we look at different decoupling points in the supply chain. And again, that's a lot of fantastic work done by ETH in Zurich around manufacturing aware design systems, but doing this with a knowledge of moving the decoupling point in the supply chain. And the hypothesis is still only a hypothesis, is that you put digital integrative platforms, which Amy was talking about a minute ago, and these platform systems in terms of innovation, platform and definition of interfaces, and then a new platform business model and ecosystem, we might unlock something at scale. It's a hypothesis. Watch this space. And thus, in that context, do we end up with an industry that looks like automotive industry? I think I was showing here that, maybe in part, certainly, to make it clear, and again, this is from Mace, is, this focus on the industrial mindset. There are a couple of things that are fantastic about the car industry that I think we want to inherit, and others, maybe they're not relevant. The first thing is this predictability of delivery of the product. Now, as a designer, you should love this, because how can you sell value? How can you sell the beauty of a design if at the end of it, a random process inherits it, bastardize it, delivers it late, and over budget? I can't sell that. I mean, it's a wasted time. It must be so disheartening. So, what's fantastic about the car industry is that it is built to create delight, and what the designer bakes into the product gets to the consumer at the end. And then we can feed it back. They did like it, they didn't like it, we managed to sell it, we didn't manage to sell it. All that feedback loop starts going, which is fantastic. It all starts from the moment we've moved construction from a random thing to a predictable, controlled process. And as soon as you do that, by the way, in terms of sustainability, if that's one of your optimizing criteria, all sorts of things get fantastic, right? Circularity means, do you plan to disassemble it? No, but I want to know what's in it. Great. Well, I've known for every minute of that building's life, what went in it, where it was at any time, and who assembled it. Once you know that, I think circularity becomes a really simple problem of just holding it there or deciding to pay for more circularity or more disassembly. It's now under control. And I think that's a fantastic part of it. The second part is you remove that obsession to build cheaper. I mean, think about it in terms of for example, the laptop category, which I love. There we go. Most of the profit of the laptop industry is made because Jonathan Ive, a product designer, decided to restate how laptops are made. And they get fundamentally involved in, let's make a better laptop. And from there, turns that into a fantastic business and delight for customers. And I think that's what we are trying to get to. But of course, we are operating in a much, much broader, much bigger industry. So it's completely different mindset. And yes, in that context, then you can restate the value chain of the industry and say you invest, you plan, then design, fabrication, and construction at site assembly is restated as a assembler of buildings, and that's a new type of business. So yes, it may look a little bit like, but it won't be every building and it won't be every asset. But certainly, I'd love to see a shift of So the target in the UK is to, within the next generation, 25 years, to get to the majority of publicly procured buildings would be assembled and manufactured products in this way, so that indeed the way we assemble, make, and build the next hospital or the next 30 is always incrementally better. We get to version 2 and version 3. As designers, that's what we want. We need to get to version 3. So this is the trick, and this is what we want to do. And I think it is important. Amy mentioned a little bit earlier on about the redistribution of the profit pool. Remember, manufacturing is a low margin business. Those manufacturers that make money are those that have brand and great designs. That's why the majority of the profit of the laptop industry is either those that orchestrate logistics to serve the customer better, Dell, or make a better product, Apple. That's it. There's no other way of making money. So you serve the customer better through delightful product design or better delivery. It's like either you make a great burger that tastes great, or you make a great experience when you buy it, but it might be a shit burger. But you know what I mean. There are not that many ways, and that is going to happen to our industry. There was a question about silo. I'm aware that some questions have come in. I would invite some more. Question here was, how do we categorize the thousands of MEP subcontractors building products that have been using these methods for 20 years, 3/4 of MEPs, etc., mostly in spite of the architect and general contractors? And I think that's really important and interesting point, is that I think you have this bottom-up manufacturing approach, and that has been in the physical, in the physicality of the building sub-assemblies, and it's just not been able to connect to the reality of those that are specifying, procure, and architecturing the overall product and the overall experience. And I think that's one of the great opportunity when we think about manufacturing and designing. Is designing for manufacturing and assembly doesn't mean as a designer, I'm God and I will tell the rest of you what to do. It means I'm going with my 2 feet inside the manufacturing capability of my supply chain, and I integrate that to turn it into delight. And I think that's something that we can do digitally, because those MEP manufacturers that have those manufacturing capabilities should be able to publish through kits of rules and through design representation for the overall team to architect around their capability. And computationally, we can reduce the complexity of making that happen. And I think that question, the way I talk about breaking down the walls and the silos, could evidence this a little bit more. I always start with this one, because when we talk about silos, I think it's quite important to try to visualize what we are talking about. We have a very specific industry. It is exactly what that previous question was hinting about. We have an industry that is very disaggregated. It's a huge ecosystem that connects and reconnects itself over time. And the fact that its information patterns and the connection that are made and unmade through projects are so different from any industry means that we need to recognize this as a way we are approaching and solving the problem. And so, it's not just about breaking the silos, it's to say, well, where are the silos and what's the nature of the silos and how persistent are those silos? And so what Singapore proposed was that we would reintegrate all the phases and integrate vertically through digital platforms. But those digital platforms need to be really low cost, really ubiquitous, and radically democratic in the way we use them. It can't be like for the initiated. Now, we personally connect platforms all the time nowadays. You connect your phone platform to your bank platform by installing an app. It's radically democratic, and you don't even realize that that's what you're doing. And I think that's where we're heading for. But it's work in progress. But that's not just going to be enough. And some more excellent work around trying to understand what are the enablers for that reintegration. And they've found that there are 3 big domains of integration that we need to work on, because those silos are not just information silos. So contractual enablers around incentive models and relational contracts. In North America, we've got the IPD form. Very important, because ultimately the contract says something, and ignore the contract at your peril is one way of thinking about it, or you will not ignore it and you'll follow it. And if the contract's not adjusted to be really in an integrative way, then it's never going to work. The technological enabler, I think we've talked about. The process enablers, back to this definition of insanity. If you're going to do the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So you really need to look at your processes and look at what are the vectors to optimize. Did the car industry end up where it is by design? No, it was a long journey, a long evolutionary process driven by a lot of iteration and evolutions and applying pressure and process improvement methodology. So I encourage everyone to read the paper by ETH that sort of summarizes all these enablers. The process one being, I think, probably the longest one to work on. Contracts, get a good lawyer. Technology is emergent. I don't think we're using as much technology as is available as it is today. Why do I say that? I just wanted to just splash up, some buildings. We like buildings after all, and I don't say all these things in total randomness. As I said, a privilege to be sort of adopted by the Borough Happel teams that go and make these extraordinary buildings. And what's really, I think, worth sharing out is that when you have an extraordinary ambition and an extraordinary justification for trying to do something that goes beyond the normal, then typically the process enablers and the contractual enablers and the technology enablers get mobilized. Because ultimately, there's no way you're going to build the Arctic in Los Angeles or the City of Dreams in Macau by playing by the normal rules. You have to invent new rules, and there is no alternative. And those are the lessons that I think Happel, for example, always wants to share out. It's just they were gifted those extraordinary buildings, and just no way you're going to assemble 7,000 pieces of metal in the shape of a dome in the middle of the desert, manufacture them in precision somewhere in Austria, and then transport them to Abu Dhabi, Saadiyat Island, and then assemble them in the right order at the right speed without material degradation. If you don't actually look at the entirety of the process, the digital systems that underpins it. So yeah, it's you know, speaking with experience, that really it does work when you have the chance. And I think those that have the chance to experiment with other people's money, then they should share out, and hopefully that's what I'm doing. And just to finish on the high, I think there are some more questions coming, but you know, the role of the architect and the engineer, what does it mean? And I think it just means that you know, let me try to answer. The architects and the engineers, when I discovered them in the built environment, they seem to be gifted something fundamentally important. And I don't think that has changed. Maybe we've digressed. The complexity has made us regress. Maybe the contracts and the capital values involved have made it difficult to do what we actually were there to do in the first place. So yes, build buildings better. That's sort of a poignant moment of, you know, all that waste, all that embedded carbon. But in the end, it was about better buildings. I think we got lost because they were not being built that predictably. And industrialization is probably the last big transformative design movement that we've had. It came out of industrializing, and so let's deliver on that. I think all buildings have become incredibly complex, and maybe we just need to get back to be able to industrialize the problems, the solution to the problems we wanted to solve. And yes, it's a transscalar and transdisciplinary problem. So I think, as Amy says, you know, it's about getting the data from manufacturing, the constraint from manufacturing, and get them to talk to the problem we are solving as architects, as engineers, so that they actually can be solved as a complete problem rather than a linear problem oversimplified, put onto an A0 drawing that people are trying to decipher. I mean, you know, having come from the automotive industry, if you ask me to run a car company on Excel and on PDFs, I give up. I can build a ladder maybe if I'm lucky. I just can't deliver to your expectation in any industry, be it banking or retail. If you force me to work on Excel, PDFs, it's just not possible. We're gonna have to do it a different way. And so yeah, that's, you know, I want to put creativity back at the heart. I want the creative process is essentially, you know, if it's so deterministic, then a computer will solve it. So really what we're left to do is to pick things that are valuable that the computer might propose, or find breakthrough or observe patterns that we think are valuable, and make those happen. So that's creativity. That's why we are here. That's why we're human. And computers are not scary at all. They are those that actually removing the unnecessary complexity. So that's where I wanted to finish. There are some questions and remarks. Lean does not result in industrialized construction. I think that's a really good line. I think, as you say, I think you're exploring multiple dimensions there, Amy. My immediate reaction to that first is lean is a manufacturing process, right? It's a methodology to make a manufacturing process perform. It's cultural. It has some tools, the methodology, but it's mostly cultural, about relentless optimization and relentless wanting to do better. And I think that's a tool that we can switch on once we've stabilized the process. And I think that's what you're saying. I think it's lean does not result in IC. I think IC is valuable only once it's being done properly. And I think you were talking about this manufacturing maturity. Ultimately, if we're going to get value from saying, we're going to operate in a different way, then we're going to have those methodologies to produce more value, and some of them are process optimization. And you mentioned a second dimension there about trade centric. I think it's the cross trade optimization that are really challenging, and maybe it's worth mentioning that one of the foundational hypotheses of the Construction Innovation Hub is that we should be focusing on systems approach rather than trade approach. So leave behind trades and say, right, the building is an assembly of systems and the systems of system. And so get the manufacturing mindset to say, how do I produce that outcome that the system is commissioned to deliver, rather than how do I stitch? Ultimately, there is leather everywhere in a car, but it's not the leather tradesman that makes a single tradesman that makes every bit of leather. There is leather in the seating system, there's leather in the doors, there's leather in the steering wheel, and that's probably 3 systems manufacturer employing 3 separate leather tradesmen dealing with that, and then reintegrating through data to make sure that you as a customer have selected a given option, and that option called for brown leather across the car, and somehow the car assembly plant knows which one is your car, that you order brown leather, and therefore the door that's coming from one supplier, the seat from another one, and the dashboard with the steering wheel from a third one, assemble into your product with the right leather colors. That is the orchestration that we are trying to do. Why? Because the cost of manipulating that data is going to 0, whereas the optimization opportunities for making dashboards, seating system, and doors separately are vast. And so that's what underpins the economic model of industrialized construction.
Alan, thank you. I think we are out of time. So thank you very much. We had some more questions online, but I think we will have to finish here. So thank you so much. It was very insightful and interesting to listen to you. So thank you very much. We are going to take like a 10 minutes break now. So you can, take something to drink and eat something and come back. We have some more interesting talks coming up. So, so bear with us, don't go away, just stay and we will take a break. So we will come back in 10 minutes from now. Thanks. Okay, everybody, we are back. So again, thank you for being with us this afternoon. It's really great, and we have some interesting talks that we had before, and now we are having some more great talks. So please let me introduce you to our first speaker for this session. Let me introduce you to architect Dan Zohar. Dan is an Israeli architect. He is the founder and partner at Haugen Zohar Architects, established in Oslo in 2008. Since its opening, the office has marked itself both in national and international architecture and art competitions, award-winning projects, publications, and teaching. Dan gained his recognition after winning the Norwegian Prize for Young Designers, followed by 2 years in a row nominated for the AR Award for Emerging Architects. In 2021, Dan established CLT Israel in Haifa. As we had in the previous talk, there will be time saved at the end for questions. So Dan, if you're ready, the stage is yours.
Hi, thank you very much, Shirley. Do you hear me well? Do you see me? Everything's okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. A bit strange to talk to an audience you don't see, but we'll give it a try. As you presented, Shirley, our office, Haugen Zoll Architects, is mainly located in Oslo, but we have 1 foot in Oslo and 1 foot in Israel now. And I will take you a bit lower down to the micro level of prefabrication for an architect which is leading a small-scale architecture office. It's very useful for us to look at, let's see here. I see that it doesn't change the slides, does it? Yeah, okay. It's very useful for us to take a note on 2 countries which are so different from each other. This is a picture from Oslo and the development that happened there in the last 10 years. And Norway is a very good place to look at how to do it the right way. It is a country in the size of Germany with a population of 5.5 million people. It has gone from being one of the poorest countries in Europe to one of the richest in 30 years. And this is giving us the possibility to put a very ambitious agendas on the table and to implement them a bit differently from many other countries. So we can really put some tests and check them continuously all the time, especially when it comes to prefabrication, to beam qualities, to environmental friendly solutions. We have also an advantage in Norway that we have a very long history of industrialization, especially on the offshore, but also very much dependent because of the harsh climate conditions in Norway, the long winter. The last thing we want is that people will come to the building site not prepared. We want to solve as much as possible on the drawing table and give it the solutions while we have the time and while our decisions are very meaningful and don't cost so much money. Our practice is using quite many digital platforms for both productions and planning. We are very well connected to the industry, working daily actually with the industry. And we have also 1 foot at the academy, working in academies both in Israel and in Norway. So being able to stand on 3 different legs is, we find it very beneficial for the office and keeping in pace with the industry. I think it's crucial that architects do not lock themselves in right rooms, but actually are out there with the industry, seeing what is going on and trying to solve the challenges that are coming together and not by themselves. I saw that the name of the lecture was would be better. I changed the name to The Part Is Over. I think it is much more relevant. And for me, it is crucial and important to show that prefabrication, not from the macro level, but from the really small scale level, from the point of view of an architect that is concerned about environmental challenges. So how can we work with prefabrication and industrializations to solve our environmental challenges and not only to look at clearly workflow and economy, but really taking a look at what was on the agenda when it comes to the discussion of what is green architecture, what is environmental friendly. And we all know that the part is over. We all know that the challenges, we cannot live any longer like we lived before. We cannot plan as we planned before. We see the change of the paradigm. We see it daily in everything that we do. In Norway already in the year 2000, they have put on the agenda the end of the oil era and checking out what will replace it in order to create working places in Norway. It is a country that is known to be a very long-term thinking. And this is something that is also reflected in their building codes. So these are the building codes that are renewing itself every 5 years. And we see that for every new code that is coming, we are reducing the energy usage in buildings. Lately in 2020, we started producing in the code, producing energy. In 2025 is zero energy, net zero. But the challenge with that is that the more we insulate our buildings, the more materials we are using. And the more materials we are using, the more pollution we create. So in order to really make this graph work, we need to look at the materials and the production methods, the transportation methods, the waste. How can we really change from energy focus to emission focus? So for like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we were looking at passive houses, building passive houses in Norway. For 10 years ago, the focus has changed quite a lot to zero emission buildings, zero emission neighborhoods, zero emission cities. And I think the most interesting here is to see that before we enter the building, we already emitted more than half part of the CO2 related to this. So working with the materials is a huge potential for us to reduce the pollution and to reduce the GHG's emissions. But this is not enough. It's not enough to look separately on the energy. It's not enough to look only on the emissions, because the next challenge that is coming is the scarcity of our resources, the availability of our materials, and what is called the circular economy. So in a way, often we feel that in Norway, even though we have all the best conditions to think long-term, to really show the world how to build in the future, we feel that we have spent a very long time on stops on the way, not on the terminal, and maybe not on the end stop. We feel that with circular economy, unlike passive houses or zero emission, we are getting closer to the real problems. We can easily build passive houses which are not environmentally friendly at all. We can easily look only at the emissions, but when we look at the circular economy, then we start to look at the whole picture. And what we experience today in Norway is that, for example, zinc and copper is very hard to achieve, to get. In 10 years, 20 years, it will be very hard to get them. Steel has doubled itself in price in Norway when it was Olympic Games in China. So it is something that you really start to see that as a planner, you have to take a look at that. So this is what we have went through in the last maybe 2 decades in Norway, from net zero, from the focus on energy like we have in Norway, in Israel today, in the new Green Code 5281. The focus is very much about energy. We have moved to emissions that hopefully it will come into the Israeli code in its revision. And from that, we have moved to circular economy. And the innovation, the Circular Norway has came with a report for a couple of months ago. It is called the Circularity Gap Report. And they have defined 7 stages how to reduce emissions by design simpler products, by raising the material exploitation, extending the product life. And if you look carefully about these 7 phases, you will see that it has very much to do with production, of course, with prefabrication and industrializations. The case of Norway is that we have all the perfect conditions to be a leading nation when it comes to circularity. But if we look at the numbers, Norway today, the circularity metric is only 2.4%. That means that from all of the materials consumed in the country, over 97% of them are not cycled back into the Norwegian economy. This is what we call the Norway circularity gap. And if that is only 2.4%, I would really like to know what is happening in other countries. So we understand the solutions, but we are far away from really achieving it. And I think the potential of industrialization and prefabrication in the building branch has a huge potential to help us coming longer in this road. Of course, having building information modeling, BIM, in the back of that as a platform, but taking the BIM all the way, not only to check the collisions, not only to understand how do we have an economical benefit from the BIM, but really using the BIM for the afterlife and using the BIM for the life cycle analysis of the project. And this is something that Norway came very far with. Every national project has to be BIM to the highest level with the life cycle and cradle-to-cradle analysis for that. I'd like to show 2 projects that we are working with in our practice now. The first of them is a competition on the Innovation Norway that we won in 2019. It is called the Design-Driven Innovation Program. And this is about making circular houses. In Norway, we build about 8,000 private houses a year from catalogs. People choose catalog houses, and when we look carefully into that, we see that these catalog houses there's no good green choices for people who wants to have it. So we were looking about how to make it circular and how to make a scheme that can be upscaled to bigger projects. And the whole idea is that we will make a project which is passive house. This, we've done it before. We will make a project which is zero emission. We've also done that before. But we will make a project which has a 90% of reuse, not recycle, but reuse of the materials. And for doing that, we have established a set of rules. How do we attack the design for such a work? From reuse to the material properties, the joints that are made for design for disassembly or design for reusing, the generality of the design, dividing each and every component to layers that can be taken from each other. The layers should follow the life expectation for each and every system. The documentation that has to show the quality of the materials that we are using, the identification that we can scan the project. The idea is that what we build today is the bank of materials for tomorrow, so we can QR mark all our elements and reuse them later. The take-back solutions with the producers, and of course, the design itself, that it will be flexible enough. When it comes to the materials, it's quite simple because there's a lot of information gathered. There's very many new producers and suppliers that did EPDs, for example. So we have a bank of already programs ready-made to get materials that we can document quite easily. But when it comes to generality, to making design which will not harm the elements we're using, that we can reuse them in the future, not any kind of site-specific elements. This is something that is very much on the architect table or the engineer table. All the elements that we're using, we are marking with QR codes so that we can scan them when we demount the building, and the architect will get the bank of the geometries he can use on his next building. We keep the layers clean, so we don't have any kind of composites that is very hard to separate in the future. And the layers themselves are organized after the life expectancy of each and every element, so that we don't need to dig in concrete in order to come to a part that we know it has a very short life expectancy. The joints, we're working quite a lot together with the producers and suppliers, how to make joints that we can disassemble quite easily in the future. And this is something that we challenge the biggest suppliers in Scandinavia, asking them what is their strategy for circularity. And we are very much surprised to see that there are very different strategies. Some of them are trying to electrify their production in order to reduce CO2 because they don't see reuse as a feasible strategy. And some of them have been doing joints that easily can take back their materials, document them again, and deliver them on site as is without any kind of another process on the way. The knowledge that we gathered over there, we took with us to the other competition that we won in Norway. This is also a competition under Innovation Norway. It is called Architecture Go Global. And the Norwegian government, they chose 7 companies to export architectural know-how from Scandinavia and out. As a result of that, we opened a company here in Israel for 1 month ago. It's called CLT Israel. And the mandate that we have received in accordance with Architecture Go Global was to take a building system that we know is very well. It is completely prefabricated, completely industrialized. It is reducing the CO2 levels. We've been working with that quite a lot, and it has a huge success in the cold climate. But we took it to check what is the feasibility of that in the warm climate, taking Israel as a case study. So the system itself is called cross-laminated timber. I guess that many of you have heard about it before. It is actually making big master boards of timber, but we transform the timber to be a composite material. So it behaves much more like concrete than like timber. It is a renewable resource. It is completely industrialized. It's very predictable in its production and its mounting time. We know to the minute how many minutes it's going to take to produce it, how many hours it's going to take to mount it. It's healthy compared to all of its competitors. Very flexible, so the architect can actually design almost what he wants, without necessarily additional price, because it is designed for, it is filed to production. We don't need actually to have drawings, and we see more and more building sites in Norway without any kind of paperless building sites. It's very rational, it's very robust. Of course, it can be reusable and marked with QR codes, as I said. Very fast in its mounting, it's much more precise than concrete, and it has a very predictable fire properties. Simple, and of course, it is reducing the CO2, and it's beautiful. This last two, like low CO2 and beautiful, I think it is a bit underestimated in our part of the world, but I think the CO2 levels are going to become more and more relevant for us. The way to introduce it on the building site, we can introduce it as containers, ship it, but we will not do it in Israel because this is, we will not use the volume efficient. We will use too much air in our delivery. So what we are doing is that we deliver it as an IKEA and a smart IKEA building actually. It is flat packed, delivered on site after the way it's going to be mounted on site. And we have a parallel process building the basements for parkings while we are producing the building in another place. The construction itself is, the load-bearing construction is continuous. The insulating layer is also continuous, and also the cladding layer. So we get an optimal situation when it comes to environment. We have no cold breaches almost, for example, and we prevent a lot of the moisture and air leakages that we see in buildings today. Just some examples. This is a private house that we did. It is 200 square meters. It's quite a lot of geometry. If you look at the left side over here, this is a mounting time of 10 hours. We placed the truck outside here, and it almost took more time to get the permission for the truck than mounting the whole load-bearing construction and the skeleton of the building. This is a neighborhood of passive houses we did. It is 40 units. It's mounted in 6 weeks. Quite complicated geometry, very precise on site. It is affordable housing, built in 2018. It received many prizes in Norway and in Europe, among others. It was nominated to the World Architecture Festival in Holland in 2019. Some other references is, for example, student housing in the last 5 years. Today, they are building almost 90% of the student housing in Norway are built in this system. 8 floors, 3.5 weeks of mounting, 185 rooms. This is 5 towers built by MDH architects, 22,000 square meters, reduction of 60% of the CO2. Mounted in, I think it was mounted in 3 months. It is from the inside, you see the elements. When it comes, it's finished from the inside. From the outside, we have, of course, insulation and the cladding. All the bathrooms are also prefabricated. So everything is delivered actually on-site, prefab and connected. And what's quite interesting in it is that the Austrian forest where we produce it has renewed all the material in this project in 7.5 hours. So when we speak about circular economy and renewable resources, I don't know any kind of other material that can show figures like this. We speak about 23,000 trees renewed itself in 8 hours. Nowadays in 2020 and 2021, we see already the CLT is coming to warm climates. We see it in Spain, for example, in Italy. It has a very interesting, good properties when it comes to seismic behaviour. We see it in Australia, for example, in this shopping center. We built tall buildings. This used to be the tallest in the world and other tall buildings in the world. Now the new tallest building in the world is in Norway, which is 20 floors, 90 meters high. There's a film here, but I think I will skip that so we have some time for questions. In Norway now we are building in CLT the campus or the headquarters for the Norwegian Sea Emergency Academy. It's 5 buildings in CLT. We also just won a competition on the riverbank of Oslo. It's a really prime location with 25,000 square meters of office buildings. And this is quite a lot in CLT, very much due to its behavior, that it weighs a fifth of concrete. We can come very precise and densify on existing roofs. So what we did in CLT Israel is that we have tried to define the typologies in Israel that are very relevant to this kind of prefabricated material. And we defined 4 different typologies. One of them is densifications on existing roofs, like we have in Tama 38, for example. And nowadays we are working with 3 different projects in Israel. These are the first project in Israel. So I'm really very keen to see how can we manage to introduce an environmental friendly system which demands completely different competence from both the architects, but all of the people dealing with the project, and how much time it will take to integrate something like this in a market like Israel, which is in some ways has all the potential to succeed, but in other ways it lies quite long back other countries that are very used to industrialized prefabricated constructions. Thank you very much. I took this picture just to show that timber construction can stand 1,000 years if we know how to build them, if we know how to design them, how to make the details, and how to keep them along the years. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, we have questions.
Actually, my question was exactly about the maintenance. I mean, we are in Israel. We're not used to design and plan the buildings or even the environments for maintenance, long-term plan. So what do you think about that? How could we actually enhance this idea of maintenance of, this fantastic work of art, I would say, with the wood that you're doing?
The challenge with wood is the UV that it gets from the sun. But in this case, you don't have UV because everything is located on the inner part, so it doesn't suffer from the sun in the same way. I think generally what we see in Norway, for example, is that projects which are rental projects, unlike sale projects, the maintenance is much more part of the planning. And we have to have it in the future if we want to build environmental friendly. We have to think about the maintenance because it takes much more energy from us, and it takes much more, it damages our environment much more than the building process in itself. So hopefully it's coming more rental projects over here. But when it comes to maintenance, compared to, for example, if you take gypsum boards, we have a much more robust system. We build it in schools, we build it in kindergartens, which are 2 typologies of buildings that suffer very much from the behavior of the user. And today we have almost 50% of the multi-purpose halls built in CLT, what used to be before with concrete. So I'm not so concerned about that. When we define the challenges in the Israeli market, because we introduced this system because we think it is much more environmental friendly. But the challenge in Israel is mostly the mindset of people, I think. They are not used to work with timber. But this is not really timber. This is a composite material that behaves completely different. That's why we can build 20 floors and not only 2 floors. So this is the main challenge, I think. And we need to have, of course, pioneers. We need to have people that think environmentally, people that can think long-term. And we need to learn from it. I think the way that it is, we build so fast. And for example, if you take the typologies of schools in Israel, shortening the time of building is essential for us in order to achieve our purposes.
Thank you.
Then we have also a comment on the chat. Maybe you can address it.
Let's see.
By John Sayer. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah. Actually, fire. This is the least problem. Fire is the one thing that I'm not really very much concerned about. You can see that there are coming tall buildings in timber. The risk with fire for us is the unpredictable behavior of the construction. If we take, for example, the Twin Towers that can stand in 1 second and collapse on the other because the insulated layer was disturbed. Over here, we have burned so much CLT. We know exactly the behavior. We know it's predictable. Of course, it burns, but you know the reports from Arup, so you probably know about the charcoal of the timber, how fast it goes. We dimension the thickness of the elements after the demands of the fire. And if necessary, we can cover it with other materials from the inside, but very often it's not necessary at all. So I'm not so concerned about that. I think the predictable behavior is very important. I'm a bit more concerned about, for example, acoustics, and that the timber itself is a lighter material than concrete.
Hi, Dan. Quick question for you on that subject of acoustics. What kind of treatment are you doing internally to reduce sound transmission, particularly in residential applications? That's the first question. And then the second one, to piggyback Daphne's question about maintenance in office uses, commercial spaces where you have a lot of large envelope openings where there's a lot of sunlight coming in. How do you stop the degradation of the wood interior from UV? Are you applying special coatings to the fenestration, to the glass, or are you treating the wood surface somehow?
Yeah. I'm sorry that I'm taking you to this kind of I mean, after the former lecture, I'm taking you really to the hands-on detail level of prefabricated construction that we find very environmental friendly. As an architect, we're working daily with environmental friendly construction, and this was the most important point for me to say, because I see what's going on in Israel. I see that we are lying far back, and we have to make a change, and we have to make it today. So everyone who's willing to introduce new methods which are more environmental friendly than what we have, and it's not enough to look at energy, it's not enough to look at emissions, we have to look at the whole life cycle of the construction. So that is why I'm coming with really hands-on. To your question, when it comes to acoustics, there's different solutions. We have to have for different typologies and different demands from country to country. Norway, for example, where we spend 90% of our time inside, is very careful about the sound demands they have. So over there, we usually put gravel, and we might need to put some screed on top of that. Depends in the weight, but there are also completely dry solutions. We're working, for example, as you saw, the circular house. Now they have built already a couple of circular office buildings in Norway, completely circular, that they use, for example, type of canvases and filt between the concrete and the timber, so they can demount it in the future and remount it again without damaging the materials. We want to avoid composite solutions that are very hard to recycle later. So there are different solutions. Some of them are more, the wet ones are much easier to achieve, but usually in the construction site, we don't want to have any kind of wet solutions because we don't want to have the drying time. When it comes to the degradation from the inside, there's different materials. There's UV filters that we usually will oil it with some white pigment and UV filtered, either prefabricated, delivered on site, finished treated, or that we might do it after mounting. Depends a bit in the project, how accessible it is.
Thank you.
I have a question, please.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan. Happy to see you.
Hi,
it was wonderful to hear you. I was lucky that I visited your projects, some of them, and it was fascinating. From the government point of view, we are concerned of two things, because the quality and the maintenance, we are not concerned. Your material is really superior, but we concern of two points. The first one, of course, is the cost of building, the cost of this material. I'm not sure the price is fit the Israeli market and the Israeli expectations of. So we have, I think, a big challenge here. The second challenge, and Tali Hirsch, I hope, is with us today too, is the code, the Tekken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Israeli standard.
The Israeli standards, yeah. If this material, of course, can pass the Israeli standard test. And another one I'm thinking about.
Specifications.
Okay, thanks, Chaim. Thank you. And another things that I think the Israeli market is also, this material will challenge it, is the mindset. I think wood in Israel has, how to say it politely, not good experience.
Hi, Vered. Thank you for the question. It's three different questions here. I'll address the first one. I'll take the last one first. The mindset of people, I completely agree, this is the biggest challenge. And the mindset of people, it depends what are our values and how do we see our common future here. You know, we are in a country that we have a very different picture of our future, depends who you ask. But if environmental is crucial for us, and when I go out and see the roads, how full it is, you know, the traffic jams, how things are happening, and how many children we have, and how it's going to look like here in 20 and 30 years, I think we have to have it much more in the agenda than Norway, for example. This is not timber. We have to compare apple with an apple. This is a composite material that behaves completely different than timber. Of course, it is a renewable material that is coming from trees, but it doesn't behave and it's as a timber. So I think there's nothing that we've seen before. You could never build in timber 20 floors for 20 years ago. When it comes to the standards, we've been checking that back and forth with Israeli engineers. We have a solution for that. And I'll be happy to meet and discuss it. I think it's not the place to discuss it here, but we have a solution for that. It's not defined as it is now as a new building system. It is a new way to introduce a very known building material. And we don't have any kind of standard for timber. We have only standard for timber roofs. So we have to refer to a foreign standard that is pinpointing CLT and not timber, because CLT is different. When it comes to the prices, we have done some calculations which are quite interesting, where we took concrete buildings. For example, we took a cluster of kindergartens built in Israel, in Ramat HaSharon. We took out all the concrete construction and we replaced it with CLT. We have redefined the fundaments because we don't need such heavy fundaments anymore. We have shortened the time on site. You know, we have adjusted the tkurot on site. And then we saw that we are actually price competitive, in addition to be environmental competitive. But when it comes to what people want, I think it's interesting, because what we see in the office in Norway, and I don't think Israel is there, but I think it might be coming. I hope it might be coming. We see developers coming to us and saying that they have built projects and they don't understand what is going on because they don't manage to sell apartments. The young generation is saying that the apartments are too big. They are not environmental friendly. They're using too much electricity. There's a whole new generation that demands something else than the generation which is building. And this is quite an interesting, you can see it in Greta Thunberg, of course, which is very well known in Scandinavia, but hopefully it's coming here, maybe not now, so it will come in 5 years. But I'm throwing the ball back to where I was when I started. When I open the door here and go to the main road, to the Kvish HaChof, I don't want to go out of the house when I see that, you know. So I think we should prioritize that, and hopefully the younger generation see it also when they go out driving to Tel Aviv and it takes them 2 hours, and they will start demanding something more environmental friendly. So also our developers will not have any choice.
Thanks. Thank you, Dan.
Dan, thank you. It was really, really interesting and open our mind to, you know, different stuff that we don't really know here. So thank you so much. We are going to take another break before coming back for another session in Hebrew. So before taking the break, I would like to thank our distinguished guest speakers for this wonderful exchange of knowledge, and to all the wonderful audience that logged in from all around the globe this evening, for being with us this afternoon. The Hebrew-speaking listeners are welcome to come back, let's say in 5 minutes from now. It's going to be 7:32. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. טוב, ברוכים הבאים חזרה. אנחנו עכשיו חזרנו לדבר קצת בעברית, שזה נורא נורא כיף, במיוחד בשבילי. אז תודה רבה שאתם כאן, זה לא מובן מאליו, השעה מאוחרת, אבל אני חושבת שיש לנו כמה הרצאות עכשיו מאוד מעניינות, אז תישארו איתנו ונשמח גם לשאלות בסוף. אז אני שמחה להציג בפניכם את אדריכל ארז בן אליעזר, יועץ בכיר למנכ"לית מנהל התכנון, סליחה, עוסק בעתיד ובחזון מערכות, כלים, מחקר ופיתוח. להרצאה שנייה אני אזמין את מהנדסת טלי הירש שרמן, מנהלת אגף תורת הבנייה ופיתוח הנדסי ביחידת חדשנות ומחקר ופיתוח במשרד הבינוי והשיכון, ולהרצאה האחרונה יהיה לנו את דוקטור ויטלי פריבן מחברת תדהר, בניין, עוסק במחקר ופיתוח בקבוצת תדהר מזה 10 שנים, והיום הוא מנהל פרויקט התיעוש של תדהר. אז יהיו לנו, כל מרצה ייתן הרצאה של 10 דקות, ובסוף יהיה לנו זמן לשאלות, אז ארז, טלי וויטלי, הבמה שלכם. תודה.
ערב טוב לכולם. אני חושב ראינו פה דברים בעולם התיעוש ברמת הדירה והבניין. אני עושה רגע זום אאוט לרמה יותר גבוהה. אני חושב שכולנו יודעים, היעדים שלנו כמדינה מתפתחת בקצב מדהים. יש לנו הרבה מאוד, אנחנו צריכים לבנות לפחות 1.5 מיליון יחידות דיור ב-30 שנה הקרובות, וכנראה שכל אחת מהן צריכה ממ"ד אחד לפחות, וכנראה שגם יש לנו מחסור של עוד איזה לפחות 1 מיליון ממ"דים בדרך, אז כל עולם התיעוש והעיסוק הזה יעלה גם שאלות רלוונטיות סביב זה בעתיד, לא ספק. לכן כשמדברים על בנייה מתועשת והמצב שלנו כמדינה היום, כנראה שחלק ממנה היא נמצאת במצב הנוכחי הזה, יזם בא עם רעיון והתחיל לעשות משהו, אבל אני רוצה רגע לעשות זום לתכנון המתועש, והוא בהחלט בתהליכי השפעה משמעותיים, מאז המצאת המחשב, האינטרנט והעננים, שהולכים כנראה להשפיע עלינו מאוד בשנים הקרובות, בתקופה הקרובה, ולמרות שהדברים כל כך חדשים, כלומר, פרסמנו פרסומים וחוקים לפני הרבה מאוד שנים, ועד היום אזרחים קשה להם למצוא את הפרסומים, ידענו איך להגדיר הגדרות ומפרטים לבנייה, היה לנו חוקים מאוד ברורים של מקרקעין, הצגנו את זה במפות, אפילו היה לנו הנחיות מרחביות וחוקים ותקנות איך לעשות את הדברים, וכמובן התפתחנו לעולם של תוכניות מפורטות, ומאוד גמישות, מאוד רזות ומאוד פשוטות, שזה מה שהמורשת שהשאירו לנו. עברנו לתכנון מאוד מאוד ענף, חוק תכנון ובנייה, 127 תיקונים כבר, יש לו גם הגדרות, גם מוסדות תכנון, גם תהליכים, גם רישוי, גם אכיפה, גם כסף, גם תקנות, והעולם הזה מאוד מאוד עשיר, ולכאורה יצאנו מהיזם ההוא, אבל בעצם נשארנו עם אותו יזם, עם כל האקוסיסטם הזה של עולם תכנון ובנייה, גם הפוליטיקאים שנמצאים, איגום המידע והמשאבים הטכנולוגיים שלנו לפעמים עדיין נראים ככה, כל הסטייק הולדרים הנוספים, מוסדות התכנון, הפיקוח, אכיפה, תושבים, תלונות, ציבור, וזה פחות או יותר איפה שאנחנו נמצאים היום. אם נשים רגע את הטכנולוגיה בצד, כל הדברים האלה נוכחים לנו במציאות, וצריך לחשוב מה עושים עם זה. יש לנו ריבוי בעיות שקשורות לאין סוף חוקים, ואפילו מדינת ישראל היה קשה לה להנגיש את החוקים לאזרחי מדינת ישראל, והגיעה עמותה ציבורית, ספר החוקים הפתוח, לקח את כל החוקים ושם אותם בפלטפורמה אחת, מי שלא מכיר אני ממליץ. על זה יש נדבך נוסף, תקנות. אם היינו רוצים לעשות בנייה מתועשת כזאת או אחרת, אני מניח שטלי תרחיב על זה, אנחנו צריכים להכיר המון מידע ותקנות רלוונטיות, כל אחת מהן מפרטת נושא אחר, חלקם באות מעולם התכנון ובנייה, חלקם באות מגופים נוספים שמשפיעים על התהליכים האלה, בין אם זה כיבוי אש או בין אם זה הג"א והממ"דים, וכל נושא אחר ונגישות, ופתאום אנחנו מנגישים את עצמנו, אז צריך עכשיו לטפל בכל הבנייה הוותיקה, וההשפעות האלה של הרגולציה ללא ספק משפיעות גם על הרצון והחדירה של גופים חדשניים וחדשים לענף הזה, ואני חושב שאחד השאיפות שלנו כממשלה זה לא להפריע לשוק הפרטי להתפתח, זה אחד הסיבות שאני פה, כדי לחשוב ביחד לאן שווה לקחת את הדברים האלה. נדבך נוסף זה הנחיות, היה עניין חוקים, היה לנו תקנות, יש לנו גם הנחיות שגופים ציבוריים כאלה ואחרים מוציאים כלפי מה שמותר, מה שהם מרגישים שמותר, do's and don'ts בתהליכים התכנוניים, בתהליכים אחרים, וכמובן אחד הקושיות הגדולות של עולם התכנון והבנייה, זה הריבוי שחקנים והרגולטורים. זה עולם מאוד מורכב, מאוד מסועף, התהליכים מתחילים מכל מיני כיוונים, לכאורה יש תהליך ברור, מייזום עד ביצוע וסיום תהליך, אבל תוך כדי המעבר שלך בין גופים, בין גורמים, הוא מאוד מסובך ולא פשוט כל כך במערכת הנוכחית, בטח שכל אחד מהגופים האלה ככל שהוא משתכלל, אז הוא גם רוצה לעשות הנחיות, וגם הוא רואה את האופק הדיגיטלי שלו, אז הוא גם רוצה להיכנס לשם, ואם כל אחד ייכנס למסגרת הזאת באופן עצמאי, אנחנו נעשה נטל מאוד גדול על כל המגישי תוכניות והמודדים ועורכי תוכניות והגופים הנוספים, וצריך לחשוב על הדבר הזה בצורה יותר משוכללת. והתכנון הקלאסי יש לו הרבה מאוד שכבות, מתכנוניות ארציות למחוזיות, לתכנון מפורט, וכמובן שמסמכי מדיניות זה גם עוד נושא של הנחיה, יש היום מסמכי מדיניות שאומרים, או הנחיות מרחביות שמגדירות בדיוק את החומרי גמר של פרויקטים, ויש לזה השלכה ברורה שמתעסקים בעולם של תיעוש, יכולות גם להיות תוכניות מפורטות מעבר שמגדירות דברים מאוד מסוימים, שגם הם ישפיעו על איך שנוכל לעשות את הדברים. כדי לנסות לגעת בדברים האלה וגם להתקדם כארגון, אנחנו היום מטפלים בשני תהליכים רוחביים, אחד זה עולם התכנון ואחד זה עולם הרישוי, בכל אחד מהתהליכים האלה יש לנו מערכת ממוחשבת, אחד תכנון זמין או בעגה יותר פשטנית מב"ת, והעולם השני זה רישוי זמין, שהוא בעצם מייצר תהליך של העברת טפסים מנקודה אחת לנקודה אחרת. עולם מב"ת הוא קצת יותר משוכלל, כי הוא מייצר, הוא כבר מחולל מידע ודאטה, שיש לו אפשרות לעשות קצת יותר דברים, גם ניתוחים וגם הנגשת מידע, וכשאנחנו מסתכלים על מה אנחנו צריכים לעשות, אז אנחנו מבינים שהיינו פה ואנחנו צריכים להיות במקום אחר לגמרי, כי מסביבנו קורים המון דברים, גם בארץ וגם בעולם, והכניסה של עולם התלת מימד לא רק כתפיסה, אלא כמערכות, והיכולת של כל אזרח לקרוא מפה, כי לכל אחד יש Waze, או לכל אחד יש תוכנת ריצה, משפיע על היכולת שלנו להתפתח ולהנגיש מידע לציבור, והאפיק הזה של עולם הבים והסטים, זה התחום מחקר שלנו עכשיו, באוריינטציה של עתיד מערכות התכנון והבנייה, ללא ספק שלפחות בתחושת בטן שלי, ברגע שעוברים
ארז, אתה איתנו? נראה לי שאנחנו איבדנו את ארז.
כן, קפאתי רגע, כן, סליחה.
כן, הנה אתה, שוב, סבבה.
שעושים תהליכים של דיגיטציה, וזה דוגמה של מב"ת, תכנון זמין, התועלות המשקיות הן אדירות, היום כל מתכנן בארץ שעושה כל תהליך ארוך טווח, קצר טווח, יכול להוריד raw data של מסמכי התוכנית, בעתיד אנחנו רוצים להנגיש עוד raw data של הוראות, לכבר דברים יותר משוכללים של AI וכדומה, אבל יש המון דברים שהיום הם כמעט בדפים ועפרונות, בכל מיני תהליכים רגולטיביים כאלה ואחרים, וברור שיש תועלת גדולה שאנחנו נקפוץ מדרגה. אם פה רואים את מפרט מבעט לדוגמה, אבל אם נסתכל על העולם שאליו אנחנו מדמיינים, מה צריך להיות הדור הבא של מה שעשינו בדו-מימד, איך צריך לראות המבעט התלת-מדי, אם נגיע לכיוון כזה, בעולם התכנון. מנגד, עולם הרישוי, אנחנו מבינים ורואים שהתפתחות באוריינטציה של בים תשרת אותנו תועלות גדולות, גם כרגולטור וגם באוריינטציה של כלל שחקנים בזירה הזאת, מאחר והבים מאפשר לנו גם את הדאטה, גם את האובייקט המרחבי, והוא יאפשר ניתוחים כאלו ואחרים בהתאם לרגולטור או בהתאם לגורם הספציפי סביב התהליך הזה. וכמובן הנגשת מידע ברמות שונות, לא צריך להרחיב, ברגע שהכנסנו את הדברים בצורה טובה, גם נוכל להוציא אותם בצורה טובה. תהליכי התכנון והרישוי שהיום הם עמוסים מידע ודפים, ותיק מידע היום יכול לקחת, שמעתי כבר מעל 100 דפים שאתה רוצה לעשות בקשה להיתר מסוים, כנראה שאם הכנסנו את המידע בצורה נכונה, גם נוכל לשלוף אותו בצורה טובה, ושאיפה ארוכת טווח זה הדיאלוג של יכולת להעביר טרנספורמציה של דאטה משלב התכנוני לשלב תחזוקת מבנים. זה אני חושב יוכל, אם נחשוב על הציר הזה בצורה כזאת, כלומר מהרעיון המופשט עד התחזוקה ונפתח מערכות, נוכל לתמוך בתהליכים הקיימים ולא לקחת יזמים מאוד מוכשרים שאחד מהם הולך לדבר פה ולהגיד לו שאתה בא לרגולטור, קח את הפרויקט שלך ותמעך אותו לדף נייר, כי זה מה שהוא עושה היום בתהליך העסקי שלו, הוא משטיח לנו מידע למרות שהוא קיים לו בצורה הרבה יותר מפורטת, והוא לא יכול לעשות שום דיאלוג מורכב עם העולם הזה בצורה טובה. ברגע שנחשוב על התהליך הזה והעברת מידע מסודר, נוכל להגיע למצב שתיק מידע יהיה ממברנת מידע מסודרת, כלומר נשאב דברים בצורה רציפה מתהליך התכנון לרישוי, אולי נוכל לפתח מערכת חוקים מסודרת בתוך המודל הזה, כי הטאבה תהיה כבר מוצר יותר משוכלל. מנגד לעולם הרישוי יש כבר מערכות, אפקוד, מערכת אמריקאית, אני חושב די מרתקת, שיודעת לעשות ניתוח פה של סוגיות בארצות הברית, אבל כנראה לעולם של הנחיות מרחביות, לעולם של בקרות, לעולם של רגולציה, יכול להיות שעוד כמה שנים ברבט תהיה לנו כפתור, בקרה מקדמית הגה, תעשה לבד, אחרי זה תגיע להגה, תאשרר את זה, או שהגה יגיד לך תגיש תצהיר ותסיים פה. כמובן תלת מימד, הסימולציות והניתוח הרב-מימדי הוא חשוב, אבל הוא לא חשוב כ-one off, לא חשוב כפרויקט אחד בודד, אנחנו רואים את זה חשוב כתהליך של רצף, שכל 1,000 התוכניות שמתאשרות במדינה בשנה יוכלו לעבור ניתוחים כאלה. זה דוגמה באנגליה לפרויקט כזה שמנסה לקחת את זה, אפליקציה אונליין שאתה יכול למדל פרויקט, ולצורך זה הקמנו 2 פורומים שפתוחים לציבור, אחד בעולם הסים והשני בעולם הבים, כדי לעשות אינטראקציות מסוג זה, כדי להכווין אותנו ולהתחבר למה שקורה, ובקרוב נעשה שולחנות עגולים סביב הנושא הזה, גם כדי לשמוע את הדברים שעולים גם מהשטח, גם מהאקדמיה וגם מהשוק הפרטי, שבכמה מהדברים שאני מניח נראה בהמשך, מתקדם בעשור אולי ביחס לממשלה, ואני מקווה שנוכל להדביק את הקצב יותר מהר בשנים הקרובות. אז תודה רבה.
תודה רבה, ארז. טלי, הבמה שלך.
רגע, למה אני שומעת עצמי כפול? אוקיי, אז בעצם אני דבר ראשון אנסה להתחבר לנושא בכלל, מה זה בכלל תיעוש הבנייה בזווית הממשלתית. מבחינתנו זה כל פעולה בעצם בהליך הבנייה שמעלה את פריון העובד, שבעצם כמות המטלות שעובד מבצע במהלך זמן מסוים. אנחנו לא מדברים פה על העלאת מוטיבציה או העלאת שכר או לגרום לו שיעבוד יותר מהר כי יש לו מצב רוח טוב היום, אלא ממש משהו מההליך של התכנון, דרך הביצוע, כולל הנושא של הניהול, כל הממשק מול הרשויות, כל האופרציה מול הגורמי ממשל, וכמובן כלה במסירה, שזה אירוע לא פשוט בכלל, וגם בנושא של החזקת המבנה. אתם רואים פה גרף ממש חם מהתנור שהכין עבורנו אגף כלכלי באגף אסטרטגיה במשרד, ואפשר לראות פה מצד אחד את הפער שהולך וגדל בין הביקוש ליחידות דיור לבין ההיצע שבעצם אנחנו היום רואים שאנחנו מסוגלים לתת. זה לא full capacity, אבל זה בהחלט עוד פעם להתחשב בשיווקים ובאישור תוכניות, הפער הולך וגדל, המספרים הם באלפים, ואנחנו רואים שהמצב הוא קטסטרופה, ואנחנו לפעמים שואלים את עצמנו, אז למה אנחנו לא מתעשים יותר? זאת אומרת, למה זה לא קורה מאליו? ופה יש איזשהו דיכוטומיה בין גורמים בשוק שאומרים, תכפו בים, תכתבו בכל מכרז שחייבים לתעש, תכינו מבנים, תוכניות של מבנים מודולריים שהרשויות רק ייקחו, יעשו קופי פייסט ולא יצטרכו לבזבז לך זמן על תכנון והכל יהיה אותו דבר ונייצר הרבה וגם זה יכול להיות הרבה יותר איכותי ונחסוך בתכנון ואז נשקיע קצת באיכות, לצד קולות אחרים שאומרים אל תתערבו, רק אל תהוו חסם, תנו לשוק לעשות את שלו, וזה יקרה מאליו. ואנחנו כנראה בתור ממשלה איפשהו באמצע, ובכמה דקות שיש לפניכם אני ככה רצה על כמה תוכניות שאנחנו בתוך יחידת חדשנות ומו"פ מקדמים בשנים האחרונות. אחת התוכניות הראשיות בעצם פרסמנו שני מסלולי תיעוש, אחד ב-2017, אחד ב-2019, זאת בעקבות החלטת ממשלה שנקבעה אחרי תוכנית מקיפה לתיעוש ענף הבנייה בישראל. כל החומרים באינטרנט, למי שרוצה לקרוא ומעוניין, הכל נגיש. בתוכנית הזאת בעצם נתנו מענקים לקבלנים עצמם, 71 מיליון ש"ח, ל-49 פרויקטים בבנייה למגורים, בין 3 ל-10 קומות בלבד. זאת אומרת, תחמנו, שם בעצם על פי התוכנית, על פי התוכנית בעצם נמצא היקף התיעוש או רמת התיעוש הנמוכה ביותר, המענק היה מקסימום 20,000 ש"ח ליחידת דיור, וניסינו ככה לקבוע איזשהו מדד אחרי זה כדי לבחון מהן התועלות. אני מודה שהיעדר התקציב בשנים האחרונות לא ממש מסייע לנו לבוא ולבחון את הפרויקטים האלה כמו שהיינו רוצים כדי להמשיך מסלולים נוספים, אבל כן עשינו איזשהו משהו אחרי שנתיים בין 2017 ל-2019, ובעצם ניסינו לבדוק בניינים שקיבלו מענק לבין בניינים שהם לא קיבלו מענק, ולעשות איזשהו מדד ממוצע ארצית ולראות איפה אנחנו נמצאים. ארז? כן, מישהו שסגור את המיקרופון. אז בדקנו מלאכות שאפשר לתעש, כן, לא כל דבר אפשר בתוך הבניין לתעש, כנראה כבלי חשמל ודברים מסוימים, הרכבת דלת כזו או אחרת, כן, אין הרבה, לא נראה הרבה הבדל גם ב-20 שנה הבאות, אבל בהחלט ביצוע תקרות, ביצוע עמודים וקירות חוץ, מחיצות פנים, ריצוף, חיפוי חוץ, בהחלט אלה מלאכות שאפשר לתעש. דגמנו 385 בניינים, בערך 80 פרויקטים, 10,000 יחידות דיור, 1,400,000 מטר בנייה למגורים, כל מיני פרויקטים, יזמות פרטית, קבוצות רכישה, גם מגדלים גבוהים, ובעצם מצאנו שיש הבדל, בוא נגיד, בין בנייה קונבנציונלית לבין בנייה פרויקטים שקיבלו מענק. בנייה קונבנציונלית אתם לראות בצד ימין, בצד שמאל, אתם יכולים לראות את המדד שהגענו, שזה בעצם פה חישבנו שעות עבודה שלוקח לעשות קומה טיפוסית, ומצאנו שיפור, בוא נגיד, במדד מבחינת תיעוש קירות החוץ, בטח ובטח גם בפרויקט הזה. אתם יכולים לראות את הפרויקט בצד ימין, אפשר להתרשם ישר שלקח הרבה יותר זמן לבצע אותו מאשר הפרויקט בצד שמאל. אני מיד מגיעה לנתונים. מצאנו שבעצם הפרויקט הטיוס המקסימלי, כן, שאנחנו כרגע יכולים להגיע אליו, עוד פעם, אני לא מדברת על הדפסת בתים וממש הבאת בית מוכן קומפלט מהמפעל. בעצם פוטנציאל הטיוס המקסימלי, נדבר עליו טיפה בהמשך. לקחנו את הנושא של יחידות מודולריות, הוא 0.8, כאשר מדד הטיוס הארצי, שזה מגוון הפרויקטים, 0.53, קבוצת הביקורת שלנו 0.43, והפרויקטים שקיבלו מענק 0.59. בעצם כל המסלולים האלה היו במטרה לתת לקבלנים לטעום את נושא הטיוס. קבענו ממש שיטות בנייה, קבענו רכיבי פנים שהם חייבים להיות מתועשים, במטרה שהקבלנים ימשיכו עם השיטות האלה גם לפרויקטים הבאים, ויהיו הרבה מאוד קבוצות של שלדאים, של רצפים, של עבודות גמר, שילמדו לעבוד קצת אחרת ממה שהם נהגו עד היום, ובעצם המדינה אומרת, אנחנו נתווך מבחינת המימון, ואולי בהתחלה זה הולך קצת יותר לאט, ואחרי זה קצת יותר מהר, אנחנו נתווך את החלק הזה, וניתן לכם לחוות על בשרכם, גם אולי את קיצור לוחות הזמנים. אפשר לראות פה חוויית משתמשים ממהנדסי ביצוע, ממנהלי פרויקטים שבעצם עברו לשיטות בנייה מתועשות, שהאתר נקי, בטיחותי, בהחלט הם רואים חיסכון ועידוד וכסף, וכן, יש דברים שהם ימשיכו איתם בהחלט לאתרים הבאים. תוכנית משותפת שעשינו יחד עם רשות החדשנות, זה עוד משהו נוסף שהוא בעצם בא בין היתר לעודד, לקצר לוחות זמנים ולשפר את הטיוס. בעצם נתנו מענק לחברות סטארט-אפ ולצורך הדגמה בפרויקט אמיתי, בפרויקט שהוא נמצא בביצוע של טכנולוגיה, זה יכול להיות רובוטיקה, זה יכול להיות ניהול האתר בצורה חכמה, זה יכול להיות שיפור בביצוע בתוך האתר עצמו מבחינת למשל הנגשת חומרים לקומה, רובוטיקה. היו הרבה מאוד דברים, אני מנוהל לצערי למנות את החברות, חלקכם אני בטוחה שמכירים, וזה גם משהו שבעצם המטרה שלו הייתה הטמעה בלייב, באתר בנייה ישראלי אמיתי, חדשנות ישראלית, שבין היתר גם כמובן באה לשפר את הטיוס. הנושא של חבר אפל, הזכרתי אותו טיפה בהתחלה, מבחינתנו היום זה החזון, זאת השאיפה. אנחנו רואים בעצם בשיטה הזאת משהו שהוא היא חייבת להיכנס למדינת ישראל, זה פשוט לא ייתכן שזה עדיין לא פה. אנחנו בכל פורום שאנחנו מכנסים ויוזמים ושותפים אליו, אנחנו חוזרים על הדברים. עשינו מחקר יחד עם המכון הלאומי לחקר הבנייה, מחקר מאוד מקיף, בראש המחקר עמדה פרופסור רחל בקר, צוות מאוד מכובד של מלווי מחקר מהאקדמיה ומהתעשייה, ובעצם ראו שיש קיצור הגיעו למסקנות של בין 40% ל-50% מזמן הבנייה, 80% מהעבודה נעשית במפעל, יש הרבה מאוד יתרונות של פסולת בנייה, פחות תאונות, מאשרים אף טיפוס, הצוות במפעל מיומן, עובד בתנאי מזג אוויר נאותים, במקביל לפרסום של המחקר, שהוא אגב נמצא באוויר, באתר האינטרנט שלנו, דוח מקינזי פרסם דוח מאוד מאוד דומה, ובממצאים מאוד מאוד דומים, למחקר, ואנחנו כל הזמן שואלים את עצמנו למה זה עוד לא קורה, והתשובות חלקן פנינו לגורמים, ליזמים, לקבלנים, וזה נכון, זה עדיין יותר יקר. מישהו צריך להרים את הכפפה, מה לעשות, תמיד פרויקט ראשון, כן, הוא יותר יקר, זה הכל חדש, הכל ככה מתגלחים על איזשהו אף טיפוס, וצריך לראות הרבה מאוד התלבטויות, איך לעשות את הביצוע, איך לאשר אינסטלציה, איך לאשר מיזוג אוויר, איך לאשר אף טיפוס בחול, להביא אותו לארץ, מה קורה עם הנמל, מה קורה עם הנפה, יש עגורנים בארץ, אין עגורנים בארץ, והרבה מאוד התלבטויות ופרטי ביצוע, ונכון, זה חדש, ואנחנו בהחלט, יש גם חוסר ודאות, אנחנו כמובן מכוונים לדעתנו לפרויקטים שהם בשלב הראשון לא למחירה, כן, יותר שוק להשכרה, מעונות סטודנטים, דיור מוגן, מלונאות וכולי. לנושא של שינוי דיירים אני בטוחה שאם זה יתפוס זה גם ירוץ בדירות, אנשים עבור חיסכון משמעותי אולי בקניית הדירה, יהיו מוכנים לקבל קלה איכותית וגם יפה. ויש עוד, נכון, אין מפעל בארץ, זה גם משהו שככל שיהיה אופק וביקוש, אנחנו נראה את הדברים קורים, ובתוך המשרד אנחנו בעצם פועלים בשני מישורים בנושא הזה. אנחנו כן בוחנים מתן סבסוד מטעם המדינה לבנות בשיטה הזאת, במסגרת אולי מסלולי התיעוש וליזם שבאמת ירים את הכפפה. אנחנו עוד פעם כמובן בהיעדר תקציב אנחנו מתקשים, אבל אנחנו עובדים על זה רבות, וגם יש איזושהי נכונות מהאוצר לעניין הזה. ברור שצריך לעשות פיילוט ראשון, ואנחנו גם שוקלים במסגרת בניית 207 יחידות דיור לדיור מוגן, שיטת פינוי בינוי בכרמיאל, לעשות את השיטה הזאת. אנחנו כרגע בתוכנית עסקית, ואנחנו נראה איך זה מתקדם, ושאם זה מגיע לפועל נוכל ליישם. אז מבחינתנו, כן, זה משהו שאנחנו בהחלט פועלים. יש יזמים, אני חייבת לציין פה, אני לא אגיד שמם, שכן, מתעניינים, מבינים שזה הדבר הבא, ואנחנו פה לנסות לעזור, גם לראות אם אין חסמים בדרך, ולהקל, ולסייע איפה שצריך, בצמתים, בוא נגיד, ממשלתיים, רגולטוריים, וגם מנסים מבחינת הסבסוד. לגבי תכנן ובנה, בימים האלה ממש, בוא נגיד בתקופה, שבועיים קרובים עומד להתפרסם מחקר על נושא של תוכנית תכנן ובנה לקידום איכות בישראל. מחקר מוכן על ידי הטכניון, בראש הצוות עמד פרופסור יחיאל רוזנפלד, והמלווים והחוקרים המשניים דוקטור חנן בן עוז ודוקטורנטית שרי תורג'מן. ובעצם הרעיון הבסיסי של תכנן ובנה היה בעצם לתת ליזם אחד שכונה שלפחות למעלה מ-1,200-1,500 יחידות דיור, לרבות כל התשתיות וכל מבנה הציבור, ובעצם לתת לו איזושהי בטוחה בשטח שלו, מן אוטוריטה, ללא צורך, בוא נגיד, להפריד חצרים, הוא אחראי על כל הבטיחות, הוא אחראי בעצם לנהל ולתכנן את הלוז של כל השכונה, בלי הפרעות, בלי תלות כזו או אחרת בקבלנים שהם בעצם קשורים ליזם אחר, או כן עובדים אצלו, או לא עובדים אצלו, וגם לתכנן מממש דיזיין בילד, והמטרה הייתה, בוא נגיד, המשרד בזמנו חשב שדרך הקצבה של הזמן ל-40 חודשים יצליח, זה יביא בהכרח תיעוש. ולצערנו זה לא קרה. אומנם יש שכונה אחת בארץ שכרגע זה בוצע, שכונת בצפתא בחריש, השכונה לא נבנה בשיטות מתועשות. המחקר גם יסביר, אנחנו צריכים להציג אותו למנכ"ל, אבל הוא יתפרסם, יסביר גם בעצם ברחבה את כל ההיבטים של התכנון והניהול והביצוע, אבל בהחלט זו חשיבה מעניינת, ואני מקווה שבמכרזים הבאים אנחנו נראה שכונות ככה שזה גם, בוא נגיד, זה גם עוד דרך שיכולה לאפשר ולעודד את תיעוש הבנייה. אני פה שמתי בשקף הזה בעצם לסיכום שאנחנו חושבים שכמו שארז אמר, הם מסתכלים על הצד של התכנון, תיעוש נמצא, בוא נגיד, בכל מקום, ואנחנו מנסים גם לגעת בכל מקום. חלק מהדברים הזכרתי, הנושא של תמריצים, פיילוטים, לנסות להסיר חסמים. כמובן יש את היחידה לבדיקה ולאישור שיטות בנייה חדשות במכון הלאומי לחקר הבנייה, שבודקת ומאשרת שיטות, בין היתר כמובן. מן הסתם מגיעות אליה שיטות בנייה מתועשות, היום כבר קונבנציונלי לדעתי זה כשמילה גסה, אז אנחנו לא רואים את זה, ואנחנו באמת משתדלים לפעול בכל החזיתות. ועוד פעם, הדיסוננס הזה בין תעשו הכל ותכפו ושיעבדו רק לפי תקן ותחייבו תיעוש ותחייבו חלונות מגודל מסוים ותחייבו ותנעצו הכל כדי שיהיה תיעוש, לבין החופש שאנחנו רואים שבשוק היינו מצפים לקצב אחר, וזה לא קורה, אז אנחנו נמצאים איפשהו באמצע ובאמת מנסים לעודד ולהתערב בין במחקרים, בין בתקינה. אפרופו מבחינת תקינה, הוחלט לא מזמן במכון התקנים, כן להכין תקן לנושא יחידות מודולריות, לא כי זה מהווה איזשהו חסם, או לא שללא התקן אי אפשר לבצע פה את שיטת הבנייה הזאת, בהחלט כן, ואפרופו אין תקן זר בחול שאפשר להעתיק, אבל בכל זאת כאילו יש איזושהי אולי צורך או רצון מצד הקבלנים להישען על איזשהו משהו יציב, משהו בטוח, רוצים איזשהו רפרנס, לדעת שהם הולכים באיזשהו שביל נכון ובטוח, ולכן הוחלט שכן נכין איזשהו תקן שלביות לנושא של יחידות מודולריות. יכול להיות שזה גם, הוא בטח לא יהיה מחייב, אבל יכול להיות שהוא ייתן איזשהו עוגן בטוח ליזמים וקבלנים. זהו, אני סיימתי. תודה לכם על ההקשבה.
תודה. ויטלי, הבמה שלך.
תודה רבה.
כן, תודה.
יש מופיע?
כן.
יופי. ערב טוב לכולם, לכל מי ששרד עד עכשיו. אני כנציג, כקבלן, כיזם שמופיע פה, אז אני אדבר פה מנקודת המבט שלנו על הנושא הזה. הנושא, אני קורא לזה מהפכת הייצור הדיגיטלי אצלנו. כמו שרבים אחרים פה הציגו, ישראל צומחת, עם מכפלת האוכלוסייה וכו'. ויש לנו בעיה פה, בדיוק כמו שגם טלי ציינה, אנחנו מפגרים בקצב. תעשיית הרכב מייצרת רכב כל 14 שעות, אנחנו בישראל לוקח לנו 5,000 שעות לעשות דירה, וזה רק הולך ומחמיר. ואנחנו, כמו שפרופסור רפאל זק שהיה פה קודם, לימד אותי לפחות, הבזבוז הוא נובע משמעת הבזבוזים הללו, ואנחנו כקבלן וכיזם רואים פה בסוף הזדמנות, כי יש פה איזשהו צורך אמיתי של לייצר מלאי גדול של דירות, ובעיה גדולה, ויש פה הזדמנות עצומה בשבילנו. בשביל לנצל את ההזדמנות הזאת, אנחנו בעצם עשינו 3 מהפכות. אני קורא לזה 3 המהפכות. המהפכה הראשונה זה המהפכה שדיברתם עליה פה בהרחבה, מהפכת הדיגיטציה והדאטה. התכנון הוא כבר לא כמו שרואים בצד ימין, הוא יותר כמו שרואים בצד שמאל, הוא כבר דיגיטלי. אצלנו אנחנו התחלנו לפני 10 שנים, יש כאלה שהתחילו לפנינו, יש כאלה שהתחילו אחרינו, אבל זה כבר לא שאלה האם התכנון יהיה דיגיטלי, אלא מתי כל אחד יעבור לזה. כלומר, אנחנו כבר שמה. מה שכן, אנחנו לפני 3 שנים, אנחנו התחלנו לעשות 2 תהליכים גדולים אצלנו, הראשון זה SLS, זה בעצם, אנחנו עושים תכנון של הביצוע, תכנון של הייצור. מה שאתם רואים פה, אנחנו עושים תכנון של האתר בצד ימין פה, ואנחנו עושים את הביצוע, ויש לנו סוג של תאום דיגיטלי לאתר. אנחנו מתכננים את המנופים, את המשאבות, את הדרכי גישה, את התבניות, כלומר אנחנו מתכננים את כל סביבת המקרו של האתר. ובודקים אחרי זה שמה שתכננו הוא בעצם מתאים לתכנון, ומשנים בהתאם. עכשיו, ברמת המיקרו, אנחנו קוראים לזה VDC, אנחנו עושים סימולציה של הביצוע, אנחנו אוספים את כל הקבלנים, את המהנדס ביצוע ואת המנהל הפרויקט, ואיתם ביחד מתכננים את הדירה. בעצם בונים את הדירה מאפס, היה מודל, לא היה מודל, זה לא משנה, אנחנו עדיין מתחילים מאפס, וברגע שאנחנו בונים את הדירה, אנחנו מתאמנים. התהליכים האלה, ה-VDC וה-SLS, הם בעצם, אנחנו מנהלים בים, כן, אבל זה שליש, השליש השני זה אנשים, והשליש האחרון זה תהליכים, וברגע שאנחנו מנהלים את 3 אלה, אנחנו בעצם בונים פעמיים את הבניינים שלנו, כל סביבת העבודה, ועל ידי זה אנחנו מתאמנים. הרי הבעיה של הבניין זה שכל בניין הוא אב טיפוס. אז אצלנו אין, סיימנו עם האבות טיפוס, אין לנו אבות טיפוס, האבות טיפוס שלנו הם במודל. זה הבניין הראשון שנבנה עם הצוות. שימו לב שזה בניין שונה מאשר המודל של היועצים. יש הרבה יועצים שמתכננים בבים, אבל אותם יועצים, למשל, הם לא עושים לא שונה דיירים, הם לא מחליטים על סוג הבלוק, הם לא מחליטים על סדר המלאכות, הקבלנים שנמצאים שם זה לא אותם קבלנים, אין שם קבלנים בכלל. כלומר, יש הבדל גדול בין מודל של ייצור, זה המודל של הסוכן שעשה אותו הקבלן, עם הקבלנים שלו ועם המהנדסים שלו, מול מודל שמתכננים. זה שני מודלים שונים. המודל שלנו זה אורות הרכבה ברמה של איקאה, מול מודל של אדריכל לצורך העניין, שהמטרה שלו היא אחרת לגמרי. זה לא אורות הרכבה של איקאה. אז אלה שני תהליכים שבעזרתם עשינו בעצם את מהפכת הדיגיטציה, ואנחנו יחסית בסדר בזה. המהפכה הבאה היא האוטומציה והרובוטיקה, אנחנו מכניסים כל מיני תהליכים אוטומטיים ורובוטיים, אחד מהם זה בקרת איכות, אנחנו שואפים כבר לא לעשות בקרת איכות על ידי איזשהו צ'קליסט מסוים או סטודנט שהולך באתר, כמו שעשינו פעם, יש לנו היום סטארט-אפ שגדל אצלנו, התחלנו לפני 3 שנים, היום זה סטארט-אפ עובד וקורא מכירות, בעצם על הראש של מנהל העבודה יש קסדה, הקסדה הזאת מצלם 360 מעלות ומשווה עם המודל. ברגע שהיא משווה עם המודל, היא משווה האם החלון נמצא במקום או לא במקום, האם השקע במקום או לא במקום. הוא מפיקה לי דוח. כלומר, בעצם הבקרת איכות שלי היא אוטומטית מול המודל. המהפכה השלישית זה התיעוש, לשם זה התכנסנו פה, והיא תוצר לוואי של שתי מהפכות הראשונות, כי בעצם אם לא היה לנו את הדיגיטציה ואת כל נקרא לזה ככה, את הבים, לא היינו מצליחים להגיע לפה במושגים הרגילים. התיעוש בשבילי לפחות, או בשביל כנציג שתדע, אני מדבר איתכם על בנייה מודולרית, אלה פחות קיטים, פחות ברנוביץ', פחות כל מיני דברים אחרים, זה כמו פלאג אנד פליי, כמו שטלי הציגה בעצם, כלומר בונים יחידה שלמה, ומשנים אותה לאתר. יש פה אחת החברות המובילות בעולם לנושא הזה, זה ויז'ן מודולר, חברה בריטית, שבעצם מה שהם עושים גרעין מטפס מבטון, ומסביבו מרכיבים את כל המודולים. זה בעצם הכיוון שלנו, זה מה שאנחנו הולכים לעשות. אנחנו כרגע מריצים מספר פיילוטים, ואנחנו, עוד שנייה אני אראה לכם את ההמשך, אבל זה בעצם בנייה מודולרית מבחינתי, זה, בנייה מתועסת זה, לא ברנוביץ' ולא כל דבר אחר. כי אם היחידה שלא יצאה מהמפעל ככה, הפועלים שיבואו אחרי זה וייכנסו פנימה, הם ירסו חצי ממה שעשיתי. כלומר, אני רוצה להוציא את היחידות ברמה מושלמת מהמפעל, ולהביא אותם לאתר ולעשות פלאג אנד פליי, כמו שטלי הציגה, בלי שאף אחד ייכנס לתוך היחידה הזאת. אם נכנסו לתוך היחידה, מבחינתי לא עשיתי כלום. אתם יכולים לראות את הסרטון הזה בווידאו, ויז'ן מודולר זה אחת החברות שאנחנו לומדים ממנה, מבחינתנו היא המובילה בעולם. אז אני אסכם את זה, הכיוון שלנו הוא גרעין מטפס עם בטון, יצוק רגיל, ויחידות מתועשות בגמר מלא בהיקף. אני אציג לכם ספק אחד לדוגמה שכבר עושה את זה, כבר היום, רולן, נמצא במפרץ חיפה, לא רחוק מהטכניון, המפעל שלו משתרע על 100 דונם, ולפני 3 שנים הוא עושה פרויקט, הוא עשה את אמזון במטה, מרכז הפיתוח של אמזון, מה שאתם רואים פה, 2,500 מטר רבוע, 50 בעצם מכולות כאלה, הוא בנה את כולם פה במפעל, שינה אותם במשאיות, ותוך חודשיים הרכיב אותם. אנחנו לא מסוגלים היום תוך חודשיים לעשות תכנון, ייצור והרכבה, הם כן, זו דוגמה לספק אחד שמצליח, ישנה ספקים נוספים, יש גם את אינדני למי שמכיר, אבל זה הספק הגדול והמוביל בארץ. מחקר שיצא בטכניון לפני 1.5 שנה, אני מניח שרובכם מכירים, חלק פה היו שותפים לכתיבתו, אנחנו בסוף מחפשים את זה, אנחנו בסוף בונים בשנה 1,000 דירות, אנחנו מחפשים פתרון לדירות. אנחנו בונים היום 1,000 דירות בשנה, אנחנו רוצים להתחיל לבנות 2,000 ו-3,000 ו-4,000 וכו'. חלקם בשיטות כמו תכנן את כל השכונה, כמו שטלי דיברה, ובנה אותה, כמו שעשינו בראש העין וביבנה, והפעם אנחנו הולכים לטייס את השיטות האלה, וחלקם גם בעניינים בודדים. לסיכום, אני גנבתי פה מארץ את הבחור שלו, אני מייצג איזשהו יזם וקבלן שנראה בערך ככה, שמי ויטלי, זה מספר הטלפון שלי, כל מי מכם רוצה לשתף פעולה בצורה כזאת או אחרת, אבל שתהיה פרקטית, גם בצורה של סטודנט שיבוא יעשה מחקר, גם כאלה יש לנו, אבל יותר בצורה של תכנון אדריכלי, יותר בצורה של שותפות וכולי, אתם מוזמנים לדבר, להתקשר, אני אשמח. סיימתי.
תודה רבה ויטלי. זה שאתה לא מכיר את הבחור בתמונה, זה אומר כמה שאתה צעיר.
זה תעלת בלאון, אני ראיתי את הסרט.
נכון.
ראיתי את הסרט, גם אהבתי אותו. שאלות לכולנו?
כן, כן, שאלות. כל הסטודנטים שלי תתעוררו ותתחילו לשאול שאלות.
לגבי הסטודנטים שלך שפה ומקשיבים, או כאלה שכבר התייאשו והלכו, אנחנו עוסקים בתחום וכולי, ואם יש איזשהו סטודנט, או שניים, או שלושה, או סטודנטית, שמעוניינים לעשות דבר כזה או אחר, אני אמצא מחר בטכניון, בין 11 ל-3, לצרכים האלה. בפקולטה לבניין, אבל קרוב.
כל מי שמעוניין, ויטלי יהיה מחר בטכניון, אתם מוזמנים לפנות אליו באופן ישיר. לאף אחד אין שאלות? כולכם רוצים ללכת הביתה לישון? אני רציתי לשאול אותך, ויטלי, שאלה. בעצם, כל מה שדיברת בהתחלה על שאתם מייצרים איזשהו מודל וירטואלי לבנייה עצמה, למה אתם לא עושים איזשהו כן שיתוף פעולה עם המתכננים? כדי לא להתחיל מאפס, וכדי באמת כן לעשות קצת אינטגרציה בתוך העבודה ביחד.
תראי, המודל הזה, זה בניין. המודל שיש פה, אתם רואים את המסך שלי עדיין, נכון? המודל שיש פה זה בניין רוטשילד, זה נקרא פרויקט רוטשילד 10, זה פרויקט, זה מודל אדריכלי. יש הבדל גדול בין, כמו שניסיתי להסביר, בין המודל האדריכלי או המודל של היועצים, זה מודל של מוצר. אותו אחד בא לתאר את מה שהוא רוצה שיבנו. כן? מה שמעניין אותי זה שלבי הרכבה של המוצר הזה. מה שאת רואה בתמונה הזאת זה בעצם, עוד פעם, אותו אדריכל או אותו קונסטרוקטור, לא כזה מעניין אותו איך אני אחפור את הבור, ואיפה אני אעמיד את המנוף, ואיך אני אחלק את הבניין שלי ליציקות. האם אני אצק הכל ביחד? הרי אותך כאדריכל לא מעניין אם אני מחלק את הקומה ל5 יציקות, או יציקה אחת, ולא מעניין אותך...
מעניינת אותי דווקא הנראות של הבניין, שהרבה פעמים מתפספסת או משתנה, כשהקבלן צריך לתת פתרונות, כי הם לא נלקחו בחשבון באיזושהי ראייה תכנונית התחלתית יותר. אז זה מעניין אותי לדעת. והקשר בין האדריכלים והקבלנים בארץ הוא קלוש, הוא בעייתי.
תראי, ככלל אנחנו לא משנים את הגיאומטריה. כלומר, מבחינתי, אדריכל קובע את הגיאומטריה, קובע את החזיתות, קובע את האבן, קובע את הפריסה של האבן, או את הקיר מסך ואת הפריסה של המוליינים. אני לא נוגע לו בזה. אני פשוט בסוף מתכנן, אם אני נגיד קיר מסך, האם אני עושה את זה בשיטה של Unitized, או בשיטה הרגילה, או על כל דבר אחר. כלומר, אני קובע את שיטת הביצוע ואת שלבי העבודה. אני לא עוסק, לא משנה לאף אדריכל או לאף קונסטרוקטור, או לאף יועץ מערכות את התכנון שלו.
לי יש שאלה לויטלי. שלום ויטלי. בתור חברה קבלנית אבל גם יזמית, יש לך קצת מספרים לגבי החיסכון שאתם בזמן ובכסף בגלל המעבר שלכם לאלף בין תכנון של הביצוע ובית בעיקר תיעוש בניסיון הקטן שיש לכם?
תשמע, אני נמצא בתדר 10 שנים. אני לא רואה את עצמי עובד בלי בים. אני לא יודע כמה זה עולה לי, כמה חסכתי, אני יודע כמה עולה לי שעון, אבל אני לא מסוגל, עזוב, אז נגיד זה אחרת. המנכ"ל שלי, הבוס, הוא לא יתחיל פרויקט בלי זה, בוא נגיד זה ככה. כלומר, זה איזשהו must כזה, must to have. זה לא nice to have, זה must to have. אבל אני לא יכול להגיד לך במספר. אתה יודע, זה כמו אחרי שניסית משהו, אתה לא מוכן לעשות משהו אחר.
כן, אבל אתה כבר משוכנע, אותי מעניין אלה שלא משוכנעים.
אני לא יודע להביא לך במספרים, אני זוכר שכל מיני מחקרים בטכניון שבדקו כמה שעות זה חוסך לאדריכל וכולי. אני
עשיתי את המחקר הזה, אני חלק מהדוח, מה שמעניין אותי זה אתה, לראות מהשטח.
אבל גם בהמשך, סליחה שאני מתערבת, במיוחד בהמשך להרצאת האורח שהייתה לנו, שהוא בעצם אמר שרק מי שכבר הפסיד איזה $1,000,000 בניסיונות לתיעוש, ומתמיד עם זה, אז כנראה יש על מה לדבר. כלומר, אז כנראה שאתם בתור חברה, כנראה לא מפסידים. אז איך אתם עושים את זה?
עושים את מה? ניסינו פעם אחת, ראינו שטוב לנו, אז נגמר.
אז כנראה שלא הפסדתם. אז בדיוק, אני חושבת שהשאלה של יאשה מאוד מאוד רלוונטית. כדאי שתבדוק את זה מחר בבוקר.
תראי, יש לנו בעל הבית שגיל גבע קוראים לו, יש לו חזון, הוא איש חזון, הוא מוכן להשקיע, פחות מעניין אותו כרגע אם הוא מפסיד או מרוויח, כי הוא מוכן לשלם בשביל החזון. עכשיו, ואז מה שקורה, המהפכה הזאת בסוף, למשל, ה-VDC שאני מציג לך פה, מגיע מלמטה. היום מתחיל פרויקט חדש, כן? לנו יש פה 14 איש במחלקה, אם אני לא שמתי בן אדם, אחד מ-14 על הפרויקט החדש שמתחיל, אני מקבל טלפון אוטומטית מהזה, למה אין? למה לא שמת? אני אומר לו, אז למה, אתה עד היום איך עבדת? הוא אומר, בסדר, אבל אני כבר לא רוצה לעבוד ככה, אני כבר לא מוכן לחשב קובים עם סרגל או עם מחשבון וכו'. אני כבר לא מוכן לעשות סביב יציקות, אני כבר לא מוכן, מה שיש פה, אתם יודעים, זה דירות, אלה דירות שאנחנו בונים ברמת גן, הם לא, מה שאנחנו עושים, אנחנו עושים שינוי דיירים, יחד עם כל הדיירים, ועושים בדיקה הנדסית, המחלקת שינוי דיירים לא מוכנה לעשות משהו אחרת. מאוד קשה לקיים את זה בכסף. ולגבי התיעוש, יש לי תשובה פשוטה יותר, אנחנו עשינו עכשיו, התחלנו פרויקט לפני חודשיים, גם טלי הייתה אצלנו, אנחנו הגענו לפער של 10 מיליון שקל שם בפרויקט הזה, אנחנו החלטנו שזה קצת יקר לנו בשביל להגשים את החזון, ואנחנו נחפש פרויקט אחר, שיהיה לנו, לצורך העניין, 10 מיליון שקל שיהיו כ-30% תוספת, אנחנו לא נהיה מוכנים לשלם 30% תוספת, אנחנו נחפש פרויקט אחר, שהפער שם יהיה נמוך יותר. אז הבנייה המתועסת, אם אתה לא מתכנן אותה מראש, אם אתה לא חושב עליה מראש, אולי יותר. מה הכוונה? למשל, יסודות כבר יצקתי. אם הייתי יודע מראש שאני הולך לעשות את זה בבנייה מתועסת, הייתי חוסך 2/3 מהמשקל, הייתי מקטין את היסודות, הייתי מקטין את הרפסוד, את העובי שלה ואת הבודדים, הייתי מקטין את העמודים בחניון, הייתי מראש חותם על חוזה מכללה שהם יוכלו להזכיר את זה מוקדם יותר, כי אני אמסור להם מוקדם. כלומר, אם מתכננים את זה נכון, אני מאמין שנוכל לחסוך, ואנחנו יש לנו כמה פרויקטים כאלה בקנה, ואנחנו עוד מעט נעשה כזה, אבל אחד מהם נכשל. למה נכשל? כי עלה 30% יותר.
יש לי עוד שאלה, גם ארז וגם טלי הזכירו בדרך זו או אחרת את הנושא של רגולציה, כלומר הם שניהם מאוד, והגופים שהם מייצגים מאוד בעד להיכנס לנושא של התיעוש, אבל ראינו שם את הרשימה של כל הכללים והחוקים, איך אתם מתגברים על זה? האם זה בשלב של האדריכלים שאתם עובדים איתם, שהם כבר באים אחרי שהם בעצם מצאו את הפתרונות ועל הרגולציה, או שאתם גם כן מעורבים בדבר הזה?
אני אענה וטלי תתקן אותי אם אני טועה, אבל נכון להיום מכל הבדיקות שעשינו, גם במיוחד בשביל הפרויקט המעונות שעשינו בשביל מכללת קריית אונו עכשיו, אין איזה משהו ברגולציה שאומר שאסור לך לבנות בבנייה מודולרית. אלה אתה חייב לעמוד בכל התקנים הקיימים, חייב לעמוד בחוקת הבטון, בחוקת הפלדה, בתקן הרוח, בתקן רעידות אדמה וכו'. כלומר, אני צריך לעמוד באותם תקנים בדיוק כמו כל בניין. אין פה הבדל, זה פעם אחת. עכשיו, תהליכי הרישוי, ישנם היום תהליכי רישוי כמו שעושים בנייה קלה, או כמו רולן שעושים פרויקטים, פשוט הסעיפים שם אחרים, אבל אין פה איזושהי, המחסום הוא לא רגולטיבי. המחסום היום הוא כלכלי פעם אחת, ואיסוס. אני קורא לזה תיעוש או איסוס. אז המחסום הוא הססני וכלכלי.
ממש כך.
תודה. כן.
כן, אני משלימה את מה שוויטלי אמר, בעצם הדרישה בתוך התקנות היא לא נוגעת כמובן צריך לעמוד בכל הסטנדרטים מבחינת יציבות, כמו שוויטלי אמר, מבחינת גודל חדר, גובה חדר וזה, אבל בין אם זה מתועש או לא, הדרישות נשארות אותן דרישות, כאילו זה קונספט של, נכון, זה תכנון וביצוע אחר, אבל הסוויץ' המחשבתי הוא לא מוטרד, בוא נגיד, מהתקנות עצמן, בדיוק ומהחשש להיות ראשוני, מהחשש, כן, בעצם לעשות את זה פעם ראשונה, כן, מפעם ראשונה.
יש לי, שירלי, ברשותך עוד שאלה לטלי.
בטח.
שאלה פנימית יותר. בדוח שכתבנו, אחת המסקנות הייתה באמת בצורה רגולטורית להכריז על איזושהי שכונה של כמה מאות יחידות כזאת שתיבנה בבנייה מודולרית תלת-ממדית, כתנאי מקדים לבניית מפעל. אף אחד לא יבנה מפעל כזה. ועכשיו אני שומע שיש למעשה כמה מפעלים שיכולים לעשות את זה, והשאלה אם הדבר הזה יכול לשנות באמת את ההחלטה שלכם להכריח לבנות שכונה.
אז זהו, אז השכונה בצוותא בחריש שלא הביאה תיעוש, על אף הכמות המאוד מאוד גדולה של יחידות דיור והלוחות זמנים ויזם אחד, מביאה אותנו למסקנה, והאמת שיום חמישי אנחנו אצל המנכ"ל מציגים לו את המחקר, ואני מאוד מקווה, כן, שבפעם הבאה, במכרז הבא, יהיה כתוב בשחור על גבי לבן, שזה ייבנה בשיטה מתועסת, כן, בסוף צריך לנעות את זה, צריך לקבוע את זה, זה האמת, אתמול היה לנו מפגש פורום חדשנות, וישבו שם חבר'ה משפיר, ושאלתי אותם, אם היינו קובעים לכם, מה הייתם עושים? כי אמרו באמת אין מפעל, והלוחות הזמנים לא אפשרו, ובעצם עשינו מה שידענו לעשות, כי היינו לחוצים נורא לעמוד בלוחות הזמנים, והיה לנו גם תכנון בתקופה הזאת, גם את התכנון היינו צריכים לעשות, זה לא שהיה רק ביצוע. ואז אמרתי, ואם היינו מכריחים אתכם לעשות בנייה מתועסת, מה הייתם עושים? היה כאן מפעל, כאילו בסוף צריך איזה זעזוע, איזה טלטלה, הדברים הטובים צומחים מאיזה קרייסיס, ממשהו כזה. לא קיבלתי תשובה, אבל יכול להיות שזאת התשובה, כן, לבוא למכרז נוסף כזה ולחייב תיעוש. פעם אחת להגיד, אוקיי, ביישוב המים, הופכים פה, מטלטלים את הספינה, וכן, ועושים game changer.
יאללה, טלי.
הלוואי, חלום. אני אמרתי להם, שהתייעצו בזמנו, אמרתי להם, תכתבו, פשוט תכתבו, אל תסמכו על הלוז. לוז, גם בסין, 6,000 פועלים באתר, אחלה לוז, צ'יק צ'ק בונים, נמלים. לא, זה לא מה שאנחנו מחפשים, זה, כן, זה משהו אחר, ובסוף כן, צריך לכתוב את זה, ולדרוש את זה. אולי בפעם הבאה, יאללה, שיהיה כבר ממשלה.
הכל מוקלט.
טלי, אני אזכיר לך שמשרד הביטחון יצא בצד אמיץ, שהם מוכנים, שיהיה להם פרויקטים, תכנון רק בבים, ואמרו שהם טומטמים.
אמיצים, אני אומרת, ככל שזה יהיה תלוי בי, כן, אני אגלה אומץ, הלוואי, שקבל את המנדט, כן, ואת העט ולכתוב, הלוואי. נראה, אנחנו בכזה תקופה ככה לא יציבה, אז מאוד מקווה. בסוף, וגם אני צריך לעזור קצת, כן, לא יודעת מה, להקל אולי בדברים אחרים, אולי להפך, לדרוש תיעוש ולתת עוד חודשיים. לא יודעת, בסוף צריך לבחון את זה כלכלית, כי זה יכול להיות שזה ישתלם מהרבה מאוד בחינות, כן, אז קצת לעכב ביצוע, ובשביל התיות ככה יותר בגלל שזה פעם ראשונה. אני על זה, אותי לא צריך לשכנע, ופה אנחנו מהמשוכנעים.
ויטלי, יש לך פה עוד שתי שאלות בצ'אט. שאלה ראשונה, לאיזה רמת פירוט יורד המודל המקדים? האם הוא יורד לרמה של גמר עם פרטים, תיאום מערכות? והשאלה השנייה, אם תוכל בבקשה לתאר את התהליך התכנון והייצור במפעל, מהרגע שאתה מקבל את המודל האדריכלי ועד שהאלמנטים מוכנים במפעל לקראת ההרכבה בשטח.
המודל יורד לרמה של הבורג לצורך העניין, עם הברגים, לצורך יש לנו חיזוקים בגבש שאנחנו עושים ברגים מיוחדים, אז הם יהיו שם. כלומר, לאותה רמה שזה רלוונטי. תיאום מערכות זה מילה גסה אצלנו, אנחנו אסור להגיד תיאום מערכות. אנחנו עושים את המודל יחד עם כל הקבלנים, כל קבלן נכנס לפי הסדר, ובסוף עושים, מסתכלים שהכל מסתדר. כלומר, זה לא, אנחנו לא עושים תיאום, אנחנו עושים בנייה. אנחנו עושים בנייה, ואז מקסימום הורסים, אבל אין תיאום מערכות. בסוף, תחשב את זה כמו מציאות, במציאות הקבלנים לא מתאמים מערכות, הם בונים, מגיע הראשון, מגיע השני וכו'. אז הרמה היא רמת הבורג. ולגבי תהליך התכנון והייצור, אנחנו היום הצלחנו להגיע לתהום דיגיטלי. כלומר, ההבדל היום בין מה שאנחנו מתכננים ב-VDC וב-SLS, למה שאנחנו בונים, הוא מעל ל-99%. כלומר, יש לנו פה, הצלחנו להגיע למה שאנחנו רוצים לתכנן. כלומר, הצלחנו לבצע את מה שתכננו. עכשיו אנחנו עושים מספר פיילוטים של חדרים קטנים יותר כמו פודים, חדרים לא טובים וכו'. אנחנו עושים מספר פיילוטים עם מספר ספקים, חלק בעצמנו, חלק עם ספקים. אין לנו עוד איזושהי תורה כתובה, וברגע שיעמוד לבניין הראשון אנחנו נפיק סרטון כזה כמו ויז'ן, וגם נזמין את טלי להצטלם. אבל הרעיון הוא, זה עוד לא כתוב וזה עוד לא שמה, אנחנו בחדרים הראשונים, נגיד זה ככה. עשינו עכשיו קומה 30 במגדל מסוים בשיטה של אינדן לצורך העניין, אנחנו בקומה 34 מכניסים שבוע הבא פוד, בקומה 36 אני מכניס עוד פוד, אחרי זה אני עושה, אנחנו בשלבי פיילוט, נגיד זה ככה.
בהצלחה.
תודה.
יש עוד שאלות, חבר'ה? טוב, אם אין עוד שאלות, אז אנחנו נסכם את הסשן הזה ואת אחר הצהריים ערב, בעיניי המרתקים שהיו לנו. אז דבר ראשון רציתי להגיד תודה למרצים שלנו, לארז, לטלי וויטלי. תודה רבה שהייתם כאן איתנו, זה לא מובן מאליו, אז המון 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 תודה. אני אגיד תודה לפקולטה על התמיכה והעזרה בלהרים את הערב הזה היום. אני חושבת זה חשוב, אני חושבת שזה נושא שחשוב שהוא ידובר, ואני נורא נורא שמחה שזה הוצף, ואני מקווה שזה לא הפעם האחרונה, אלא שיהיה לזה המשך. אז
קודם כל, שירלי, המון המון תודה על היוזמה היוצאת דופן הזאת באמת, ואנחנו כמובן מחכים לכנס ההמשך הבא.
סבבה, רשמתי לי.
כמובן, אבל זה יהיה כבר בפקולטה, אני מקווה.
אמן, אמן. אמן. אז תודה רבה לכולם, ושיהיה ערב טוב, ושרק נתעסק בתיעוש, זה בריא.
תודה שירלי, כל הכבוד.
תודה לכם, לילה טוב.
תודה רבה.
ביי ביי, להתראות.
תודה רבה.
תודה.